I have to try it sometime.
Hello.
Although I have to say, we were playing last night, and I had a 5-ball run, which is personal best by a lot. So
All right. Very cool. Hi, Hungbin.
Hello, hey everyone.
I like your shirt.
I love that color too.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Michael, do you mind prodding our fellow members?
Yeah, I was just looking to see who we're still missing. Looks like Karen and Alan.
Karen's in now.
Okay, so Alan usually makes it. So
Yeah, here he
here
is.
he is.
Yeah, hello.
Hello, hello.
Perfect. Hello, welcome.
Thank you.
Oh, look at Lance all due to that. Hello.
Oh.
I keep hoping Maurice is going to show up in a baseball outfit.
he's not actually playing, right? He's just shuffling kids back and forth. Or is he playing?
He better wear a hat when he goes, or a jersey or something.
You coach Maurice, or you just chauffeur?
I just show for these days. My coaching days may be behind me. I used to.
Amy, does the video play beforehand? Is that what's going on?
Generally speaking, yes.
Okay.
About 10 seconds.
Okay.
And you're ready.
All right. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the June 9th, 2021 meeting of the Chapel Hill Town Council. We're pleased that you have joined us tonight, whether you're streaming or watching by video or TV. We're happy to have you. I'm sorry I had to miss last week's meeting, and I want to thank Mayor Pro Tem Parker for stepping in for me. And before we get started, I wanted to share with you that I had an unfortunate incident Sunday night, and I was stung by several bees while watering my garden. I'm very highly allergic, haven't been stung in many, many years, but I'm very grateful to our fire department and our emergency management, Orange County, and we hear about Southern Rescue today too, for their great service and great care they took. And I got to do my ride along in an ambulance, so there you go. But unfortunately, this was a pretty heavy incident and it swole my mouth and tongue. So I apologize if my speech is a little off tonight, but anyway, I am very grateful and recovering nicely, so thank you. Tonight we have a very full agenda. We're going to begin with the final budget for the 2021-2022 fiscal year. And also we have 3 hearings: a public hearing to consider the closure of a portion of right-of-way on Mitchell Lane, a legislative hearing to consider incorporating the climate action response plan into the town's comprehensive plan, and a public hearing regarding the issuance of bonds and adoption of a guaranteed maximum price for the East Rosemary parking deck. Then we'll be continuing the evidentiary hearing for the redevelopment of U Place Mall. And as a reminder to council, we're making appointments to 4 advisory boards this evening, and we'll also need a resolution to forward the recommendations for the Orange County seat. So thank you for that. In keeping with our state laws governing virtual meetings, we are going to have our roll call per usual. When I call your name out, please say aye or here, whatever works for you. Mayor Pro Tem Parker.
Here.
Ms. Anderson.
Here.
Mr. Boyncy.
Here.
Ms. Gu.
Here.
Mr. Nguyen.
Here.
Ms. Ryan.
Hi, here.
Ms. Stegman.
Here.
And the mayor is also here, so thank you. We do welcome public comment at our meetings, and we encourage you to speak up. We know some people have registered ahead of time, but you're also welcome to raise the hand or star 9 on your phone if you're joining us by phone when those items come up. Mr. Parker will call you in 2 at a time and get you to speak to us, and we hope that you can stay within your 3 minutes. We appreciate, but we do want to hear from you, so thanks for joining us. First up is the proclamation for South Orange Rescue Squad's 50th anniversary. And we're pleased to honor and thank the South Orange Rescue Squad. On June 11th, they'll celebrate 50 years of volunteer service to the citizens of Chapel Hill, Carrboro, Orange County, and the state of North Carolina. This amazing organization helps save lives in our communities 365 days a year, providing ambulance service, EMT crews, and technical rescue services. They also provide on-scene EMT support for our firefighters during active fire responses, and they keep us safe when we come together to celebrate, whether it be a UNC athletic event, celebrations like Halloween and 4th of July, or local road races. Over the years, South Orange Rescue Squad has had over 2,000 volunteer members serve our community, and they have taught life-saving skills to over 10,000 individuals. Following their motto, always prepared to serve, squad members engage in countless hours of technical training and continuing education to be ready for the respond to fellow citizens in our time of need. In appreciation for their commitment, dedication, and service, we're pleased to proclaim June 11th, 2021 as South Orange Rescue Squad Day in Chapel Hill. In doing so, we encourage everyone to show their gratitude for their amazing volunteers for all they do to keep us safe and healthy. So thank you to Orange Rescue Squad. All right. I also have a few announcements, so bear with me here. Sorry. All right. We've had some promotions recently, and our town manager has recently announced the promotion of 3 members of town staff to new leadership positions. Mary Jane Lerdlinger, the town's assistant manager, and Lauren Clark, our director of housing and community, will now be serving as deputy town managers. Congratulations. And Rand Northern has been chosen to be the town's new communications manager. We want to thank all 3 for their service to Chapel Hill and congratulate them on their new leadership positions. We're very excited, so thank you. The public meeting for the Colbreth Lane reallocation will be a virtual meeting tomorrow evening at 7 p.m. Check the website. We're looking at adding bike lanes to this stretch of road while it's being repaved, so please attend and find out more. There's going to be a pop-up vaccine clinic Monday, June 14th at Smith Middle School. The clinic will be open from 9 to 2. Vaccinations are free and no ID or proof of insurance is required. You can register by calling the number or using the MySpot website. Information about this is on our town website. And the Reimagining Community Safety Task Force meets next Monday, June 14th at 5:30. And our next council meeting will be Wednesday, June 16th at 7 p.m. Information about all those meetings can be found on the town website. Please always double check. So, any other announcements from folks? Great job last week. Thank you again for all of you stepping up. I appreciate it. I got to watch the meeting later and y'all did a great job. So, all right. So now it's time for public comment for items not on the printed agenda. And I know we have some petitions. Mr. Parker, you want to call in the people that are here for the petitions, please?
I will. We have Jeanette Bench followed by Bo House, and they are both talking about petitions. And in particular, the Parks, Greenway, and Recreation Commission requests that the council authorize a $100,000 match toward a North Carolina Land and Water Conservation Trust Fund grant application.
Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you. On May 18th, 2021, the Parks, Greenways, and Recreation Commission voted unanimously to recommend that the council authorize a $100,000 match toward a North Carolina Land and Water Conservation Trust Fund grant application. If received, the fund would allow the North Carolina Botanical Garden Foundation to acquire 7 acres of undeveloped property, which would add to its Stillhouse Bottom Nature Preserve area and effectively grow the Morgan Creek Bluffs National Heritage Area. The North Carolina Botanical Foundation also holds conservation easements on 12 acres of contiguous private land with landowner commitments for additional conservation easements and land donations toward a 100-acre preserve. Stillhouse Bottom has the only undisturbed steep north-facing ravine left in Orange County. Over 100 plant species have been identified, and the stream quality demonstrates a healthy amphibian community. The 6.9-acre Rainey property occupies the easternmost portion of Stillhouse Bottom and is an ecologically exceptional mature mixed hardwood forest, with most likely has never been logged. Conservation protection of this parcel is essential for maintaining the ecological integrity of Stillhouse Bottom. Please support land conservation efforts that will also add to the town of Chapel Hill's open space. Thank you.
Okay, Bo House, followed by Elizabeth Youssef.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm Bo Howes. I'm a longtime resident of Chapel Hill. And in my day work, I am the Director of Conservation and Stewardship at the Triangle Land Conservancy. But I also am the chairman of the Botanical Garden Foundation's Conservation Committee. And that's the hat I'm wearing today when I come to you. And I would echo Ms. Bench's comments about the Rainey property. It's a very important conservation property. And the one thing I would add is that I or Dr. Johnny Randall of Botanical Garden would be happy to give you all a tour. Anybody who wants a tour of that property would be happy to do so. It's a really beautiful mature forest, and I can show you any of the birds and identify them by ear for you while we're out there. So I'm happy to do that, but would urge you to support the petition of the Parks and Greenways and Recreation Commission. And thank you all for having me tonight.
Thank you, Bo.
Okay, next is Elizabeth Youssef, followed by Robert Beasley.
Welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me today. My name is Elizabeth Youssef, and I'm here as an ambassador for the Borgen Project. We are a national nonprofit, nonpartisan organization that works to engage citizens locally in efforts to see stronger U.S. leadership go towards improving global poverty conditions abroad. And like many cities in the U.S., Chapel Hill has benefited from the reduction of global poverty because of the new markets for consumers that it has created. And I would like to ask the council to consider sending a letter to Senator Burr, Senator Tillis, and Representative Price that makes them aware that the council views global development programs as imperative for creating more consumers globally, and also for creating new markets for Chapel Hill's businesses. So yeah, thank you guys so much for your time.
Thank you.
Okay, Robert Beasley, followed by Rachel Gray.
Thank you. I'm here to petition the town council regarding the J Street land tract that was selected in 2018 for development. In review of the history of the tract, there's evidence in the public record that the land was purchased in 2005 using funds from the 1996 and 2003 open space bond funds. The open space bond funds were approved by the Chapel Hill residents to be used for land that would be preserved as open space for public use and enjoyment. After the 2005 purchase and prior to 2018, the J Street land tract was referenced and represented in town of Chapel Hill memorandums, reports, and land use publications as open space, consistent with the terms of the open space bond that funded its purchase. However, in 2018, at the recommendation of town staff responding to a request from the town council to identify town-owned sites for development of affordable housing, the J Street land tract was selected and prioritized for development. The selection of the J Street land tract for a privately owned rental housing development is in conflict with the original intent of the land's purchase by the town of Chapel Hill in 2005, and is in direct conflict with the voter-approved intent of the open space bond funds used to purchase the land. In light of these discoveries in the public records, I formally petition the town council to investigate the source of the funding for the J Street land purchase, and if it is confirmed to be open space bond funding, then to address how land purchased with public funds intended to preserve open space for public use and enjoyment is now being prioritized for private rental property development. I also sent in a presentation with the public record evidence that I referenced in the petition. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Rachel Gray signed up. She doesn't, unless she is logged in under another name, she does not have to appear to be here. So if Ms. Gray is here and you are under another name, if you could raise your hand or make your presence known. Otherwise, we will move on to the stormwater petition that was submitted.
Why don't you go ahead and submit that, please?
Okay, you want to talk about it, Amy, or shall I?
I think you should, George.
Oh. Okay, I'll be brief. The town stormwater regulations have not been significantly updated since 2003. Since that time, there is strong evidence that climate change is in causing and will continue to cause an increase in adverse stormwater events. The regulations are targeted to be updated as part of the LUMO rewrite, but since the LUMO rewrite probably won't be done for a few more years, and we know that stormwater is increasingly a topic of discussion during our development reviews, as well as increasing concerns by many of our residents who are experiencing problems. Council members Ryan, Gu, Wynn, and Stegman and myself have submitted a petition calling on the town to do a comprehensive review of our stormwater regulations and propose any new or amended or changed regulations, hopefully within an 18-month window. So thank you.
Right. We also had one more petition on the list. I don't know if there's anyone here to speak on it, but it was a request to town staff to bring forward historical and environmental information for the town-owned property at Mount Carmel Church Road and Bennett Road. So if we can take all those petitions together.
I move we refer and receive and refer.
Receive and refer, okay.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved by Mr. Parker, second by Ms. Stegman. We'll need a roll call vote, please. Mr. Parker?
Aye.
Ms. Anderson?
Aye.
Mr. Boynsey?
Aye.
Ms. Gu?
Aye.
Mr. Wynn?
Aye.
Ms. Ryan?
Aye.
Ms. Stegman?
Aye.
And Mayor says aye as well. These will be received and referred to staff, and we will take a look at our petitions. We'll be working on some of those over the summer to see where we are in a lot of them. So anyway, are there any other individuals wishing to speak on items not on the printed agenda this evening? Okay.
There are no raised hands. There don't appear to be any.
Okay, then that brings us to the consent agenda, Council. How say we?
I move consent.
Second.
Been moved by Ms. Ryan, second by Mr. Parker to move our consent agenda. Need a roll call vote, please. Mr. Parker?
Aye.
Ms. Anderson?
Aye.
Mr. Boynsey?
Aye.
Ms. Gu?
Aye.
Mr. Wynn?
Aye.
Ms. Ryan?
Aye.
Ms. Stegman?
Aye.
And the mayor says aye as well. Thank you very much. Okay, that brings us to our first discussion item, which is consider the final budget. Hopefully we're passing a budget tonight, folks. That would be wonderful. So I'll turn it over to Mr. Jones and Ms. Oland.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Mayor and Council. We are here tonight to present for your consideration and adoption the budget for fiscal year 21-22. We have reached this point after many months of discussion with the council, dating back to the council's work session back in February. We also held work sessions with the council in March and April to help us develop a foundation for the budget. I formally presented the manager's recommended budget on May 5th, followed by a public hearing on May 19th and discussions with council on June 2nd. Included with this item is the budget ordinance, pay plan, and fee schedule for fiscal year 22. Our budget recommendation is to adopt this ordinance establishing the town budget for the fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2021. Here are a few key takeaways from the budget. Our focus is on recovery and restoration as we move beyond the COVID-19 pandemic. This budget supports council's strategic goals and priorities. We are proposing a property tax rate of 51.4 cents. There are no fee schedule changes in this budget. We are providing a 3% of market pay adjustment for our employees. There are no significant changes to our core operational services. There's also a keen focus on climate change, social equity, and infrastructure. So here's a quick look at our budget allocation for next year. Transit makes up 23% of the budget, with general government at 14%, public works and police at 11%, and fire at 9%. We made a few changes to the budget since our meeting on May 5th, including changing the property tax rate from 52.4 cents to 51.4, adding $300,000 in expected revenue from the inspections permitting for next year, adding $210,000 to the fund balance appropriation, reducing the OPEB pre-funding contribution by $250,000, reducing our streets repaving fund allocation, the new allocation, by $50,000, reducing our PAYGO capital by $100,000 from our original proposed budget, and reducing our new climate action fund by $30,000 to the number that you see there at the bottom of your screen of $470,000. And then we've added new planning grants in the grants fund to the tune of almost $395,000. And we added a BRT project manager position to the transit fund at a little over $91,000. So here is the final budget total that we are recommending council adopt this evening, a little over $120 million in appropriations, less our transfers for a total of nearly $117 million. Again, our recommendation is for council to adopt the budget ordinance for fiscal year 21-22 as it currently stands. I'd also like to take a moment to thank the council for your robust and productive discussions during the budget season, the public for its involvement in the development of the budget, and of course our staff for their hard work in putting together a strong budget that ensures the continued delivery of high quality services here in Chapel Hill. I will stop there. Thank you once again for your time and your work during the last few months, Council. Amy Oland, our Director of Business Management, and I will now take any questions that you may have.
All right, folks, any clarifying questions at this point? Wow, good job. Okay. Anyone from the public wishing to speak on the budget?
There is not.
Okay, well, I'll bring it back to council for comments. Or Ms. Ryan, did you have a question and I skipped over you? Sorry.
Yeah, sorry about that. It's my first time working with the background. It's hard to get your hands in there. Maurice, can you just explain to me the planning addition that was in the, I think it was 2 slides earlier?
I can provide clarification. Are you talking about the planning grants?
Yes, thank you.
Yes. So those are annual planning grants that we receive, but we don't get notification of those awards in time for the manager's recommended budget. The 3 grants are our transit demand grant, the TDM grant, our 5303 planning grant, and the STPDA grant. So all 3 of those come out of the planning department. A lot of them are working with the TJ Cog and the MPO.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Sure.
Great. All right. I'll just say great job working during difficult times, trying to put together something that keeps us functional. I know we're going to be talking about the ARP monies at some point, but this gets us moving forward. I saw Ms. Anderson and Ms. Stegman.
Thank you. Yeah, first of all, thank you for all the hard work that went into this. I know it's a very challenging and lengthy task. So thank you for all your work. One question, I know that we weren't able to fund the tracking software that would have been part of the short-term rental enforcement program. I'm wondering if there are plans to fund that in future years or what the plan is around that.
Well, we don't necessarily have a plan for that, but we could certainly add that to the list of potential expenditures as part of any sort of year-end surplus that we may have. So if council is interested in that, we can certainly put that on the list for consideration once we have those final numbers and come back to council.
And I guess what I meant by what's the plan? I meant without the software, what does enforcement look like?
Right. Well, that I think it's working with staff to try to identify those any of the STRs that are out of compliance, and then also being complaint driven as well for the time being.
So you mean staff is going to be like searching the web, or?
That could be part of our exercise. Yes, ma'am.
That sounds kind of grim. Okay. Well, I would certainly advocate that be on the list, but obviously others can weigh in on that as well. I guess I would just like to make a comment that I think this is a really great job overall. I'm happy that we got to this place. I'm happy we were able to compromise on finding the way to have less of a tax increase, but also being able to do a lot of the things that we want. I would like to advocate for next year that we think about some way to make sure that all the programs that we fund have evidence and outcomes associated with them, and that we detach as much politics as we can, that we just go based on that any program that we're funding have evidence and outcomes required. And so I think that would be a really important way. We've seen that we can no longer just rely on property taxes and that we have to give up things we care about, and we have to make hard choices. So regardless of whether it's programs I think are cool or whatever, I just think that we should really be thinking about how we get the most bang for our buck and get the outcomes that we need, because we all have a lot of shared goals and hopes and things that we want to do. So I hope that we can put that into our process for next year. Thanks.
Ms. Stegman?
I was just wondering if there's any update on, I know we talked about the potential at some point of having a fund to help with the property tax revaluation issues, but there's questions about whether that was something we could do, whether the county already had a fund. Have we gotten any more information on that yet? And it's fine if we just know it.
Yeah, it's something that we're still looking at, council member, and we may be able to fund other ways if we can figure this out and figure out the best way to make this happen.
Okay, thank you. And I just want to also echo council member Anderson's comments about the process and quality of this budget, and that we were able to come to the place we are. So thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Parker, then Ms. Goode.
Yeah, first of all, I'll second or third the comments made by my colleagues. I really appreciate, as always, the hard work on the budget. I think we've come to a good place, and I think, as is always the case, nobody ever gets everything they want, but that's kind of life. And hopefully next year we'll be able to continue to, find funding for the things we weren't able to do this year. To 2 points, actually one that Councilmember Anderson raised. I thought the plan was that there were going to be permitting fees, and those permitting fees would actually then be used to cover the cost of enforcement, and whether that's tracking software or whatever. So I was surprised to hear you say that there's no money to buy the tracking software, because I thought we were going to charge permitting fees and hopefully those would cover those costs.
Yeah, I was just going to say, at this point, I don't believe that the permitting fees would cover the complete cost of the software. So.
Okay, that's unfortunate. And second, just to expand on something Councilmember Stegman said, last night they haven't approved the budget yet, but they approved the framework, and the county budget includes $250,000 for helping folks who are having tax issues. But I'm assuming, I don't know that for a fact, I'm assuming that will only cover county taxes. So it seems like if they can figure out a way of doing it, we ought to be able to do the same thing, assuming we can find the money. So I would hope that maybe we can understand better how the county is approaching this and see if we can't use that as a model. But overall, as I said, I'm really pleased with where we are, and I want to thank everybody.
Thank you.
Ms. Goode and Mr. Boynton.
Well, again, I share my other council colleagues' appreciation for this very challenging budget at a very challenging time. I think our town staff is really trying to balancing different needs and trying to make sure that we're not overburdening our residents in their property tax at a very difficult time. So I think there are things that we clearly know that there are still significant needs that we're not able to address at this time. So one of them is we have been talking about how we're going to make sure that we're going to put this town's finance in a sustainable footing in the long term, especially when it comes to maintaining our infrastructure, our sidewalks, and these things. I think that we have been talking about that every year. And the numbers that we reviewed at the TCAP meetings, I think just every year it shows that our road conditions, especially our sidewalks, are deteriorating. And it seems like the current fundings that we're able to allocate to it is not able to not only we're not able to stabilize the situation that we're in, let alone trying to catch up all the backlogs that we have been accumulated over the years. So I feel like we need to really put that into the front burner of our budget process. I don't know how we're able to do that, but we have been talking about this long-term or midterm budget planning. I'm hoping that we are actually finally will be able to get that on our schedule sometime in the fall. So also for the STR, I feel like if there is no mechanism that we have to enforce it, I think we're not being serious actually trying to do anything, because I mean, we can just make all the new regulations, but if there is no backup to enforce it, I don't know that why we're doing that. I think at least I would think that we should set up a like short-term rental hotline, something that residents have been talking about. They do not feel comfortable to call the police because, you know, all the sensitivities associated with calling a 911 for a noisy neighbor. But those situations like having a party regularly every week, or these things that happens, I don't know if, I think it probably costs a lot less if we can have a short-term rental hotline that has been set up just for the people to submit their complaints, and then we're going to address them or at least look into them. I understand that the technology is becoming more and more complicated. Now it's not only Airbnb, there are vacation rental by owner, there are Expedia, they're Booking, all the different agencies, they actually have their platform adding that capacity of you can listing your properties. So actually they become more and more difficult to track. And if we're actually going to do that, I want to make sure that we're doing that fairly and in a equitable way. But I think set up this hotline for people.
Thank you. We can delve into that in our STR discussion, but thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So that is something I feel like we need to at least look into.
Great. Mr. Boyancy, then Ms. Ryan.
I also want to echo the thank you for your efforts, Manager Jones, as well as the efforts of our other town staff in putting together this budget and being flexible with it. I just want to also emphasize the points that Mr. Parker and Ms. Stegman made with respect to finding a way to provide some assistance for our lower income residents. Property taxes is, I think, an under-regarded element of affordability and living in a place like Chapel Hill. And I know it's been garnering some attention locally, certainly thanks to the efforts of the Marion Cheek Jackson Center. And I know that there have been some major news outlets who focus some attention on this issue as well. But I mean, some of it, I acknowledge is a bit out of our control in terms of how property tax evaluations are done in North Carolina. It's bound up in local as well as state processes, but over the next few months and year, I hope that we can find some way to do our part, do what we can to help out folks who are vulnerable, our lower income residents, so that they can stay in Chapel Hill and not look to move. Thanks.
Ms. Ryan?
I just wanted to echo the thank yous. I think you took on an incredibly difficult task this year, and you've managed to make a substantial investment in climate action. You've increased money for infrastructure and human services, and you've very importantly given the staff pay raises. I know that they all worked above and beyond during the COVID pandemic, and I'm glad that we can recognize that and reward them for it. So thank you for that, and to you and Amy and your teams for all your hard work.
Thank you.
All right. Need a motion, please.
I move we approve the 2021-2022 budget.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Parker, second by Mr. Nguyen. We'll need a roll call vote, please. Mr. Parker?
Aye.
Ms. Anderson?
Aye.
Mr. Boynton?
Aye.
Ms. Gu?
Aye.
Mr. Nguyen?
Aye.
Ms. Ryan?
Aye.
Ms. Stegman?
Aye.
And the mayor says, yay, aye. Good job, folks. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Council.
Okay. That brings us to item number 12. Open a public hearing to consider closing an unimproved and unpaved portion of Mitchell Lane public right-of-way.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. We bring up my presentation here. Okay, so good evening. Thank you for letting me come speak with you this evening. My name is Chris Roberts, and I'm the manager of engineering infrastructure. Tonight, I'm going to present to you the recommendation to open and close the public hearing to consider requests to partially close a unimproved and unpaved portion of Mitchell Lane public right-of-way. There are 8 slides, but will only take about 5 minutes to complete. So the recommendation is that council open and close the public hearing for this public right-of-way closure request. Note that public comments may be received at the email below concerning this right-of-way closure. And on June 23rd, the council may adopt a resolution to permanently close this public right-of-way if it so chooses. So again, staff are recommending to open close the public hearing, and if council so chooses to act on the resolution at the June 23rd council meeting to permanently close this right-of-way. So where we're located at, this not too far from Town Hall on the northwest side of downtown. You can see Caldwell's here, which turns into Gormain on the west side. Here's Edwards Drive, Craig Street, and of course Mitchell Lane. And the particular right-of-way is actually right in line next to or through the edge of this location here. So as you recall, we followed the process laid out in NCGS 168-299, which governs local governments in closing public right-of-ways. There are provisions in the legislation for public communication, division of land of closed right-of-way areas, and an appeal process. It requires that public hearing so that you may decide if this closing would be detrimental to the public interest or the public rights of any individual. This request was originally to close the public right-of-way, as you can see here in blue. Let me just reorient where you're at too. There's Gomains, there's Caldwell, and there's Mitchell. The reason why we're calling this the Mitchell public right-of-way is because it's pretty much right in line to Mitchell Lane. And of course, here's Edwards. The reason for that is that there is a house or a duplex that sits actually right on the right-of-way. You can see the building behind there, and the existing right-of-way is basically between the right-hand door and the right-hand most window in that area. The adjacent property owner is the town, which is the managed by the Department of Public Housing. This town-owned property has several challenges in being developed due to a stream riparian buffer, which is right over on this side, and also a sewer main that you can see right through here that runs through the property. Once closed, it would isolate not only the remaining right-of-way in green, which is up here, if you can see that, but also it would isolate the back town property. There's actually a second piece of town-owned property back here. town staff have recommended that this right of way be included in the closure request. So our closure request is for both the blue and the green. So it's this total area. So what will it look like after it's closed if adopted? So this right of way is closed in the right of way area on 502 Gourmets, which is this property, or I'm sorry, 502 Gourmets is right over here. So this 502 Gourmets, this is 502 Gourmets, which is a little confusing. So 502 Gourmets is conveyed to the owner of that property. Additional area is recommended to be conveyed to the same parcel owner to provide the required setback so it's compliant with the town setback ordinance. And as you can see, the original property line is right along here. And of course, the original right-of-way is right along here. So what we're proposing is adding an additional 8 feet outside of the building envelope to make it compliant with our standards. The lot lines in Caldwell and Gourmets, which are down here inside the public right-of-way, actually underneath the road, will also be moved up to this area so that the property that's here that's privately owned will actually be conveyed to the town. Both town-owned parcels will be recombined, which are these two up here. It says Town of Chapel Hill Housing Authority, but in reality, it's actually owned by the town. But these two parcels will be recombined. Also, the property that's behind the special needs for Elizabeth Young, that right away would be closed. And according to 160 A 299, it'll be divided up in half, which is the recommended division. So 5 feet will go to the town. The other 5 feet will go to Miss Young's property. There have been many meetings with the owners of 502 Gourmets, planning of public housing, and also the owner of 502 Edwards, which is again the Special Needs Trust for Elizabeth Young. It's actually owned by Barbara Young. And they all agreed to this plan. So the key issues is that there's no use for this particular right-of-way. The owner of 502 Edwards Drive, which again is Miss Young, has requested 1/2 of the closed right-of-way area to be conveyed to her. And the town-owned properties will be recombined per the draft recombination plat that you just saw. Going back to the recommendation, again, that the council open and close the public hearing for this public right-of-way closure request. Note that public comments may be received at the email below concerning this right-of-way closure request. Today, we have not had any I guess, complaints or opposition to this. And on June 23rd, the council may adopt a resolution to permanently close this public right-of-way. Thank you. And at this time, I'll be happy to take any questions you might have.
Thank you. You'll bring us back to full screen.
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Ryan.
So I see that we're granting the owner of, I think it's 502, additional land to meet the setback on his property. Are we receiving any money in turn for that property?
He is giving us the property that is underneath Gourmets and Caldwell to the town right now. That's underneath the public road. So he's giving that to us. And also he's performing all of the survey that you saw and drafted the preliminary plat that you saw as well.
Okay, can you show me on the map real quick where that land under, I'm not sure what you're referring to.
Yep. 1 minute here. Let me get back to it.
Thank you.
So it's this land that's right here that is part of the property owner's land. Actually, it's right there. There's the property line that's dashed. If you can see it along there.
Okay.
So, that person is giving us this area. And also we're going to, I think, pull the property line back along here as well.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay, back to full screen, please. Thank you. Any other questions from council? All right, anyone from the public wishing to speak on this item?
There is not. or unless somebody just,
Yeah, this is Omar Zinn. Council, how you guys doing?
Welcome.
My brother and I, along with Jeff Tate, represent this property. And I just wanted to, I'm sorry, I'm just coming from a birthday party right now. I'm in my tank top in my wife's car, but if anyone has any questions, I'm here to answer them. Ultimately, we're doing a land swap so that the property in 502 Gomains, which does not meet, current setback requirements, but ultimately owns a significant portion of Caldwell Street. We're doing a land swap front of the 502 Gomains property for the right side of what is town-owned land, so that 502 Gomains now meets setback requirements. There's now actually a true right-of-way, not owned by an individual private property owner. The town land to the right, as mentioned, is excessively steep. There's water there. There's also a sewer easement. So it's certainly unbuildable. And I just wanted to re-clarify some of the things that were already stated. If anyone has any questions, I'm certainly here to answer them.
Thank you. Okay, bring it back to council.
I move we close the public hearing and take action or consider taking action on June 23rd.
Second.
Oh, motion by Ms. Anderson, second by Mr. Boyncy. Roll call vote, please. Mr. Parker?
Aye.
Ms. Anderson?
Aye.
Mr. Boyncy?
Aye.
Ms. Gu?
Aye.
Mr. Nguyen?
Aye.
Ms. Ryan?
Aye.
Ms. Stegman? Mayor says aye as well. Thank you very much, Mr. Roberts, for bringing it to our attention.
Thank you.
We'll see this back on June 23rd. Item number 13, open a legislative hearing to consider incorporating the Climate Action and Response Plan as a component of the town's comprehensive plan.
I'm going to share this item tonight
Thank you.
on behalf of John Richardson, who was unexpectedly unavailable. And let me get that into, oops. Get it on the right slide. All right. I'm Mary Jane Nerdlinger, your Deputy Town Manager, and the public hearing tonight is to consider incorporating the Climate Action Plan into the town's comprehensive plan. So you would be opening the public hearing, closing the public hearing, and allowing written comments for 24 hours after this evening. And I think the first question is, what does it mean to incorporate the plan? It is a policy document, and it would become part of the town's local land use goals, policies, and programs, and relate to Chapter 160D of our general statutes. And why would you do this? As I think you all know, this would be a voluntary agreement before the town and the applicant. If we were to add site-specific conditions in a conditional zoning district related to the comprehensive plan, the Climate Action and Response Plan, which would be part of our comp plan. And the memo that Mr. Richardson prepared had several examples of how this could play out. So this is just one of those. There could be a condition regarding the EV electrical vehicle charging stations, specifying that a certain percentage of the spaces would be for EV electric vehicles, and having conduit to a certain number of spaces. And that condition would support certain examples in goals in the plan, and two of those are listed on this slide. And specifically, a condition like that would then point to an action such as the one on your screen, and then the related strategies and tactics that connect to the condition. And in this example, one of those is incentivize or require charging stations for new construction. So the purpose would really be to link all of this information in the Climate Action Plan to the discussions with an applicant, and to have conditions for development that would relate to the council's goals. So the Planning Commission did recommend, and they voted unanimously to make this decision. I believe you received a copy of their action as well as the Environmental Stewardship Advisory Board. They also voted unanimously to do this. Your public hearing then is tonight, and you could make a final decision on June the 23rd to make this change. So again, the recommendation is on the screen, and I'd be happy to try to answer any questions for you.
Thank you. Are there any clarifying questions from council? All right, anyone from the public wishing to speak on this item?
Not seeing anyone, but somebody snuck in last time, so I'm not sure.
We got Zoom bombed by that's good. All right, council, what would you like to do, please?
I move that we close the public hearing and consider taking action on June 23rd.
Second.
And moved by Ms. Anderson, second by Mr. Parker. We will need a roll call vote, please. Mr. Parker?
Aye.
Ms. Anderson?
Aye.
Mr. Boyncy?
Aye.
Ms. Gu?
Aye.
Mr. Nguyen?
Aye.
Ms. Ryan?
Aye.
Ms. Stegman?
Aye.
And Mayor says aye as well. It's unanimous. Thank you very much. Thank you, Ms. Nerdlinger, for bringing that to us. That brings us to item number 14. Open the public hearing on the issuance of limited obligation bonds and consider approving the guaranteed maximum price for the Rosemary Deck project. Mary Jane, is that you again? You're muted. There we go.
Thank you. All right. I think we've got this one. All right, so I am Mary Jane Nerdlinger. I'm going to present tonight's update with assistance from Adam Faust of Samet Corporation, who you heard from last week. Amy Olin, our finance director, and other members of our team are available for any additional questions tonight. There we go. Last week, we discussed the project scope and budget with you, and we have provided some additional materials by email outlining the major drivers for the changes in construction costs. Tonight, we're asking you to approve the overall project budget, which is $39 million, and to hold the public hearing for the limited obligation bonds financing. I wanted to note that the manager did send you a revised resolution before the meeting that has 2 edits for consistency with the approved economic development agreement, which was adopted last September, and note specifically that the $39 million is the overall project budget. And as we discussed last week, the deck is part of the council and the community's vision for a vibrant and sustainable downtown. The council approved an economic development agreement in September of 2020 with a project budget that was based on the best information at that time. Today, we are targeting June 23rd for a property closing so that this project can move forward. After tonight, the contractor will confirm the bids. We will return on June 16th to ask you to approve a resolution authorizing the town manager to sign the construction contract, and then demolition will begin in very early July. We are still looking at a fall of 2020 completion date. The project cost of $39 million is based on the bids received on May 21st. It includes the design decisions that we discussed last week, a 2.32% contingency, and value engineering recommendations that align with the project vision. And Adam will be able to talk about those in a little more detail. I just wanted to note that we've been using the terms guaranteed maximum price and total project budget interchangeably. That's why we wanted to make sure we were very clear that 39 is the total project budget. And then you have a spreadsheet that breaks down the components of that we emailed to you. So with that, I want to turn it over to Adam. I can't see my screen.
Thank you, Mary Jane.
There we go. Thanks, Adam.
So we talked last week about the increase in the costs since the project was first envisioned as it's continued on through 2021. As published by the Associated General Contractors, or AGC, the average increase in hard costs actually from April of 2020 to February of 2021, which is the latest data that was published, has increased by 12.8% on average. When you compare apples to apples from our July 2020, which was our initial construction cost estimate, to the current GMP estimate, the costs have increased by 11.2% in that direct apples to apples comparison, or coincidentally 12.8% when you add the rock removal into the project that was incorporated in fall of 2020. So in summary, the hard cost increases that we are seeing in the bids are consistent with the industry-wide market trends. Next slide, please. So some just general summary level highlights of various areas of the work and the comparison from the initial construction estimate to the GMP estimate, essentially almost a year apart. And you can see in the right-hand side the differences in these specific areas of the project. You can see the major area of differences are the areas that have greater intensity of metals and things that we talked about in last week's meeting. The vertical structure, the building exterior, the elevators and the plumbing, mechanical, electrical systems, and the site work associated with the rock. Next slide, please. As we discussed last week, there were some potential cost savings options that we outlined. Here are some additional examples, including the items from last week and a few others, with some representative cost savings amounts associated with each line item. As you can see, this slide here, these items total up to just under $400,000 in potential savings items to be finalized.
All right, and Amy, this is yours.
Okay, so we'll begin my portion of the presentation this evening with a look at where we left off last week with the projected cash flows for the Rosemary Deck project. The cash flows were presented showed that it would take about 10 years to reach a positive cumulative cash flow, solely looking at the revenue and expenditure projections tied to the new deck. Next slide. So based on feedback from council, we were asked to include the UNC contribution into the cash flow projection to provide a more accurate depiction of the transactions connected to the project. So this second projection includes that UNC contribution. Also note that we did make a change to the total amounts that we are presenting. Last week, we had 3.9 million. We had to change the calculation. We didn't accurately depict the UNC pro rata number of spaces. So the correct amount that UNC will be contributing is about 3.545, but we've rounded to 3.5 since we know some costs are potentially going to change. And we have noted that in fiscal year 23, when we anticipate receiving this payment. So including that UNC contribution, you can see the revised cash flow projections now show that we would see net positive cash flows once the deck opens. Next slide. So to talk a little bit more about the funding options, we talked some about this last week. So our current plan is to borrow up to the $39 million in the limited obligation bonds to fund this project. The goal would again be for the parking fund to be self-sustaining and therefore able to support the debt service without the help of the debt service fund. Partnering with UNC, the town is having UNC is purchasing 100 spaces for the 3.5 million that we shared, and that will help offset the negative cash flows in the beginning of the project when we're having to pay debt service before the deck has actually opened and begun generating revenue. So we're also currently reviewing the 151-page interim rule on the American Rescue Plan to see if we could use some of those funds to help offset some of the costs. Infrastructure is one of the areas that's mentioned as a possible area of allowable funding, and we will return to council in the fall with additional information about the American Rescue Plan Act and interest from council in how to use those funds. Next slide. So as we talk a little bit more about the limited obligation bonds, LOBs, which they are commonly referred to, are a little bit unlike the general obligation debt, which is backed by the full faith and credit of the government, which means that we can basically use any revenue source to pay that debt. LOBs are a little different in that they are pledged to a specific revenue stream, which would be the parking deck revenue, and therefore require collateral for the borrowing. As part of the LOBS, we intend to issue up to $39 million for the Rosemary Deck project. We also plan to issue $6.48 million for the second phase of the Ephesus Fordham project, which is the Elliott Road reconstruction. This came before council many times, and last time about a year ago, to authorize the construction contract and moving forward to partner with Park Apartments for this project. As part of the project, we are looking at refunding the 2012 limited obligation bonds, which were issued for the 140 West project, and potentially refunding our 2015 Bank of North Carolina installment financing, which were used to renovate various municipal facilities and purchase public safety equipment. And the reason we are looking at some of the refunding, twofold. One, as the LOBs require collateral for the transaction, we will use the deck for that collateral, but also by refunding the 2012 LOBs, we'll be able to free up the lien on the Town Operations Center and also have that to put up as collateral for the project. And just looking at all of our outstanding debt to see where we can potentially gain savings based on the really good interest rates that we're seeing in the market now, to help with our debt service fund. Next slide. So the decision points for council on this project and the financing this evening are tonight to open up the public hearing and take comments on the issuance of the limited obligation bonds for the projects that we just discussed, to then close the public hearing and to take public comment for 24 hours after the closing of the public hearing, and also to approve the resolution for the guaranteed maximum price for the Rosemary Deck project. And then on June 23rd, we would come back before council to adopt the final authorizing resolution and the related documents tied to the limited obligation bond issuance. And we are available for questions.
Thank you. All right, council, any clarifying questions? Ms. Ryan?
Hello, thank you for all the hard work. Thank you for the spreadsheet that you sent with the budget line items. And my first general comment is it would be really useful on spreadsheets like this to get annotations to explain what is in different items, because some of them are a little obscure to me. So I can see that the variances, I'm sure I can see where those material costs have gone up. We went up almost $1 million in plumbing, sanitary, and water. Is that a materials issue?
Yes, ma'am. That is predominantly cast iron piping and copper piping, both of which have increased substantially.
Okay. In terms of the emitted art and PV, is that emitted photovoltaic?
Yes, it is. And I think we talked about this last week, that is something that we'll be looking for another source of funding, perhaps with the American Rescue funding.
To do. I just wanted to make sure that we're still going to be building the deck structurally to support it and providing the electricity and the conduit and all that. We just will not be actually constructing the PV at this point.
Yes, we understand that getting to that point is important, and yes.
Okay. Under the value engineering savings, I saw those items, and I don't know from a maintenance point of view or a longevity point of view what the difference in materials, say, on the facade would be, but it seems to me that if you've got plumbing and electrical and conduit and that kind of thing, you really want that to be high quality and to last, because if that goes, that's a really big expense. So I don't know if there's some of that could be pulled back out, and we could maintain a higher quality level on those really key portions of the construction.
Mr. Faust, can you share if there's any ones that you would actually not recommend doing?
So all the ones that have been presented are consistent with other projects across the area. None of them would jeopardize or provide a substantially inferior product into the deck.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, and could somebody talk to me about contingency? Just if we have, this is something I'm very unfamiliar with, so I need to be educated, but earlier we had 1.7 million, and I understand now that we've done the design work, we don't need some of that money, but now we've got 767. So is that, and I haven't worked out what percentage of that, of the project that is, but is that an industry standard contingency, a high, a low?
Adam, are you okay answering that?
Yeah, so for a project of this size, that contingency is a realistic amount of contingency. It's definitely not on the high end, but it's also not on the low end. We'll be working together with the town to manage the contingency very tightly.
Okay, because you, I mean, just quick math is telling me that's 2%. I don't, and if my math is off, correct me, but especially, I don't know if we are looking at an environment of continuing materials cost escalation, or if we're expecting it to go down. That seems like a really tight number to me. So I will defer to people who know more than I do about that subject, but that makes me a little bit nervous. And those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other clarifying questions? Ms. Gu and Mr. Parker?
Yes, well, I actually went back to read again our economic development agreement that the council passed last year. So when it comes to this, the guaranteed maximum price, it is discussed in this, the final construction contract. I don't know, do we have that final construction contract in place?
We're reviewing that right now, and normally what would happen is the council will authorize the town manager to execute the contract based on your decisions tonight. The construction contract is for the guaranteed maximum price, and that's the sort of first major total in that spreadsheet we sent you. And the total project cost, the overall project budget, I think is what it's called in the EDA, is the $39 million.
So, so here it says, or if I read it correctly, it says that, or February 1st, it used to be the February 1st. I think apparently that will probably delay that to now. So it said there is this contract, the deadline, and by that deadline, we should have three things in place. One is this construction contract that states the guaranteed maximum price. So it's like, it's part of that construction contract. And then the second, it says that there should be a written approval from the town's independent review consultant as to the fairness of the stated maximum price. So do we have that as well?
Walker Consulting has received all of this information. They're reviewing it. They're going to give us that in writing.
So they have not provided us the approval or their evaluation yet?
Yeah, we don't have it in hand in writing today.
Okay. And then also it says the third come to us before the council should be a letter from the construction company or the project architect confirming that all the major regulatory permits that are conditions to the start of construction are in hand. So do we have all those permits and all the other things that we have in hand in case, like, you know, we can go back and say, oh, we need to add other things. I think that I believe that all the permits provide some finality of these numbers and say we have all these things in place and these are the costs. Do we have that?
The major permits from the state are in hand, and the town of Chapel Hill permitting department is in review for the final building permits. But all the major permits have been issued.
And we did have a construction team meeting this morning. Everything is in line. So we have full confidence that we'll issue the town permit on this as well.
So given that we do not have the evaluation from external consultant that mentioned in this economic development agreement, would that make more sense for the council to administratively review or have those three documents that are already stated or agreed upon in this EDA before the council have the final vote of whether or not they would agree with this 39 million cost or bond?
I think another approach would be to make that a condition of your authorization. We recognize that you have limited meetings and the project schedule has a lot of lot of things that have to be crossed off, and we're trying to work towards that closing. So I don't know if the manager or anyone else has a suggestion. That might be one way to think
Are
about
we going
that.
to have those documents in hand by the 23rd?
Yes.
Right. It could be a stipulation then for the item tonight is that we do have those documents before the 23rd.
And I'm hoping the council will have time to review that, the things that mentioned in the EDA.
Okay. Mr. Parker?
Yeah, just a quick question. We'll be doing comments and stuff later, right?
Yeah.
So just a quick question. I thought originally that that Clay Grubb was actually building the deck and then we were sort of buying it from him after the deck was completed. But it seems now that we are actually building it ourselves. Is that correct? So the contractual relationship at this point is between the town of Chapel Hill and Samet rather than between Grubb and Samet. Is that correct?
For the construction contract, that's correct.
Okay.
Okay.
And could you just explain again, so we still have Grubb as doing project management or construction management, and their contract is such that as the price goes up, they get paid more because they're working off of a percentage of total cost. So what role does Grubb play in doing the value engineering and keeping prices down?
Adam and Seth, I mean, they have been involved in all of the decisions and all of the discussions, I mean, that we've had to date. I think most of the items we've seen have really been market driven and less about project decisions. There have been design decisions, of course, that have affected the project.
Mr. Dye, do you have anything to share?
Yes, Michael, those are both great questions. So that's how, going back to the Grubb paying for the deck, those were discussions early on as we evolved through the process last summer and we negotiated the EDA with the town, the economic development agreement with the town. We arrived at the current posture, which is that contract being directly with the general contractor in the town. Just as a reminder for everyone, we went through the rezoning, we fronted the cost for all of that, all of the design work to date. We've been intimately involved with Samet and the town staff from the inception of this project, beginning with discussions with you all through the design phase, through the rezoning phase, and then certainly currently. So Mary Jane referenced these monthly meetings we've had with staff, and it's a large group of folks talking about the construction management and the project management aspects of the project. We work closely with Samet and Perkins and Will through the design phase, identifying a lot of these options for VE, which ones make sense, which ones don't. And we meet regularly with Mary Jane and Dwight and others to make sure we're managing that. So that's been our role from the beginning, our commitment to the town. And it's a team effort with ourselves, with Samet, and certainly with the town and the design team.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, any other clarifying questions before we hear from the public? All right, anyone from the public wishing to speak? You're muted, Michael.
I don't think so, unless Amy knows something I don't.
Okay, I'll bring it back to council then, please. We're back for comments. Mr. Parker, you had some comments?
Yes. So number one, I'm really pleased that this is moving forward, and this is an exciting time for the town. And while I don't know that anybody loves parking decks, I think many of us love office buildings and wet labs. And so I'm really excited about where this is leading to and what is going to happen for our downtown in terms of jobs and and vibrancy and all sorts of things. So I'm really excited about this. One thing I wanted to request, about a few weeks ago, my colleagues, Alan, Karen, and I submitted a petition requesting that the town change its policies so that we would have a target of 15% for minority women business enterprise / disadvantaged business enterprise contracting, so that when the town let contracts, that there would be 15% dedicated to those groups. Because, not surprisingly, since the petition was only submitted several weeks ago, the town has not officially had a chance to change the policy. So we are still working under a different policy, which provides a lot less in terms of set-asides or preferences for those disadvantaged groups. What I would like to do, therefore, I've discussed this with the manager, and I hope he concurs. What I would like to do is ensure that in a project this size, almost $40 million, 15% of that is, if my math isn't too terrible, almost $6 million, that we take advantage of this project to start making a very real and tangible not contribution, but effort to work with these kinds of, with these business enterprises. And so I circulated earlier this afternoon. I apologize for doing it so late, but wasn't sure what the best way to do this was. And so I would like to propose an amendment to the resolution, which may accompany the amendment that Councilmember Gu was suggesting. And I'll just read it. I've furnished the language to the town staff, so perhaps one of them can put it up on the screen. But it just, a second part of the resolution would be it further resolved that the final contract for construction shall stipulate that there will be a 15% target for MWBE/DBE participation in the project. I'm hoping we can add that to the resolution and enable Chapel Hill to live our values and start, make a major effort to support those kinds of firms.
Mr. Jones, you have anything to share?
I would just say that we will do everything we can at this late point to try to get to that 15% target. It may not be easy to get there at this point as we're rounding the corner towards construction, but we'll certainly work hard to try to get to that 15% target.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Other comments? Well, I'll just share, I'm really, really pleased. I'm sorry it's taken this long so that the construction prices went up on us, but that's been the nature of the market in the entire region, actually. I'm proud of the staff for working diligently towards making this a reality. And I know this is going to be a game changer for downtown for sure. And it's going to give us an office building that we weren't going to have before. It's going to add vibrancy to our downtown and set us up for the future. So very, very excited. Ms. Ryan?
Yeah, my comments are, I'm concerned that we have a very, very, very small contingency. So I think the number has changed a whole lot since we first were discussing this project. I think, again, I echo my fellow council members' sentiments that it's a game changer for downtown and it's a really big deal. So I think the project is worth it. But again, I am extremely concerned that that's not a lot of money to be working with. So if you guys can just go back and think about that a little bit more. And I know that I appreciate Joe's commentary about all the involvement that his company has had and all the work that they have done. I don't know if they would be interested in having a discussion that talked about making sure that they get a fair fee, but that some of the increase in fees is due to just escalation in materials cost, which isn't a cost to you. It's not a, it's not work that you've done or your expertise or your staff time. So maybe if there could be a little bit of a discussion about whether we can go back and sharpen our pencils on that one, I'd appreciate that. But I look forward to it happening, and thank you very much.
Okay. Ms. Gu?
Well, as I expressed at the time of when we discussing this project last year, I have concerns with this project, especially for at this time that investing such a huge amount of the town's funding on the parking deck. If you look at, there is a paper on Wall Street Journal. Of course, there are many papers that are coming in recent years about how to build back in a more socially and environmentally more sustainable and equitable society. And today's paper, I can forward, is about how the parking deck is going to evolve in the future. And it says that there is diminishing use for the parking deck, and that all the municipalities around the country are thinking of either repurpose the parking deck or figure out some other ways to managing their traffic and make the investment for bike lanes and the pedestrian passes. I think that should be the way that we go. And in the Greenway and TCAP joint meeting, we talked about that we need $37 million of investment to really bring all the Greenway plan and the bicycle multimodal plans into reality. So that kind of investment, this 39 million, can actually be used to completely transform our town and make it workable, walkable, sustainable. I think these are the things, all the things that we talk about. We're just talking about them, we're not actually making investment, and instead we make this $39 million of investment for parking deck. I think it's the technology, the more flexible working arrangement that we are seeing around the country, and all these things that are pointing this is the wrong investment that we are taking. I'm disappointed that and I think what we are seeing now, this increased significant cost of 39 million. I think given the inflation and everything goes on, this 2% margin, I think it's just not realistic. I mean, I feel like this is the wrong investment for the wrong item at the wrong time.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Is there a motion from council?
Yes, I move we approve resolution R1 with 2 additions. One, the amendment that I read a couple of minutes ago, and as I said, I furnished the text to the town staff. And 2, with the stipulation that Councilmember Gu requested, that all documents stipulated in the economic development agreement be in hand by the time of the closing on June 23rd.
Okay.
Second.
Is that Mr. Nguyen? Okay, it's been moved by Mr. Parker, second by Mr. Nguyen. We will take a roll call vote, please. Mr. Parker.
Aye.
Ms. Anderson. Can't hear you.
Sorry. Aye.
Okay, great. Mr. Boynton.
Aye.
Ms. Gu.
Nay.
Mr. Nguyen.
Aye.
Ms. Ryan.
Aye.
Ms. Stegman. Didn't hear you, sorry.
Aye.
Thank you. And the mayor says aye as well. So thank you. We'll see this item back on June 23rd. All right, that brings us to item number 15. I will share with you that this is the application for a special use permit modification for University Place at 201 South Estes Drive. Any speakers tonight will have to be sworn in, as this is a quasi-judicial hearing. So if I can get, is Sabrina swearing in tonight? I'm not sure who's doing the swearing in.
I am.
Thank you. If you can swear in our applicant representatives here, and then as we bring speakers in, I know we have some people signed up to speak, we'll swear them in as well.
Okay. Can I see a show of hands, please? Okay. Do you swear or affirm that the information you're about to provide is the truth to the best of your knowledge?
I do.
I do.
Thank you.
I do.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay. So I'm not sure who kicks us off. Ms. Johnson? Thank you.
Let me just get this started. Good evening. I'm Judy Johnson. With our planning department, sorry, just trying to make sure that was rolling. I have just a couple of slides to share with you on walking you through our process a little bit and our recommendations. So we're recommending this evening.
Judy, we don't have presentation view.
Oh,
thank you.
Thank you. How's that? No?
Same.
Let me just start over.
Almost. There you go.
Excellent, thank you. Apologize for that. So this evening, I have just a couple of slides for you, mainly updates. And our recommendation for you this evening is to close the evidentiary hearing this evening and consider adoption of the resolution, which would approve the special use permit. And this would be if the council does make the finding that the application meets the 4 findings. Just want to refresh you where we are in the process. So we did just a final little box on this slide just for your information. So once the project passes through this council action this evening, assuming if the project is approved, it would go through a final plan technical review phase. And this is where town staff would be working through a lot of the technical details. Just want to remind you that this is a special use permit, somewhat different than we have been reviewing over the past year. And this does have the 4 findings of facts. So I'm not going to read those, but they are in your packet and they are also on the screen here. Very briefly, just a quick summary of the project. I think everybody knows where it is, at the corner of Fordham Boulevard and Estes Drive, surrounded by Willow. It's approximately 43 acres. It's zoned community commercial, and the applicant is considering keeping that zoning and allowing with the design standards some specific uses. So a couple of the updates that we want to walk through quickly since the public hearing 2 weeks ago was they did make an offer of multifamily conversion rights. And this is where we would be, they're agreeing to a certain number of residential units, and with as they build out the commercial and reach a minimum of 375,000 square feet of commercial, that they could then convert additional floor area to residential units. And this would be only for the 2 pods of A and C, which are highlighted there. And the conversion rate would be 1 residential unit per 800 square feet of floor area. And if the conversion rate is used, they have also agreed that the buildings would be vertically integrated with the ground floor being commercial. So that's just want to make sure that that has changed slightly from the original or the proposal before, which was 1 unit per 1,000 square feet. So they've lowered that threshold a little bit. Another change that was brought forward at the last meeting was they have committed to putting in a multi-use path along the entire frontage of Fordham Boulevard up to Willow Drive. So this would be in front of the Binkley Baptist Church property as well as their own frontage. They've also agreed that they would install sufficient solar arrays, most likely rooftop, to power most of the common areas of Pod A. And this is, Pod A is the one that is along Willow Drive. We did hear a lot of some interesting questions about transit changes and possible updates to services there. And after talking with our transit folks, felt that, and this is from transit, that to develop the drop-off area for the senior shuttle and Easy Rider and doing some wayfinding signage would is where we would like to be at this point. There was a little concern about adding stops on the Harris Teeter side of the mall would require the buses to circulate somewhat awkwardly through the shopping center and possibly be frustrating for customers for that additional time. And then the last question or update before you this evening is regarding the affordable housing proposal. And the applicant has offered 2 scenarios, one 15% of the units at 80% of the AMI, or 10% of the units at 65% of the AMI. And we're interested in getting some feedback from you this evening. If you noted in the resolution of approval that those areas are italicized, because we're waiting for a definitive response from council as to which opportunity to pursue. Each proposal would be for a 30-year timeline. And alternatively, the council could consider a mix of this percentages and AMI. So we are looking for some direction from council this evening on this. And that concludes my presentation. And I'm happy to answer any questions. I believe the applicant's attorney would like to speak out following me.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Brown?
Good evening. Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. As a housekeeping matter, I do want to be sure that the documents that are in the packet that you received, as well as some information that that you were able to receive from Brian Peterson, are included in the evidence in this record. Rather than going through all of that item by item, that information is there, and I know you've had an opportunity to look at it. So we would ask that you consider that as part of the evidence. I would like to make brief closing arguments as to the 4 findings, but before I do so, if there is additional public comment, we would like an opportunity to hear that and see what we need to do there. And also, if there are additional fact questions from members of the council, we'd like to get those answered in this process, and then I would like to bat cleanup at the end.
Okay. I know we have some clarifying questions from council members. Do you want to start there? Any council
Yes,
members?
please.
Okay. Ms. Ryan?
Hi, thank you. So in the materials we received, we asked about making sure that that buildings weren't 1 story, only 2, and the applicant has agreed to do that in most of the on most of the pods, but not in pod D. And they cited that it would be a problem with footprints, but I'm not understanding why going more vertical would be a footprint issue. Could you explain that to me?
Sure. So, we're proposing small scale. I believe we have a max of 25,000 square feet in pod D. So by requiring multi-story buildings, you're adding staircases, you're adding elevator shafts, and so you're increasing the building's footprint.
Okay, is that because, I assume you would be demolishing the building and rebuilding, correct? Not simply adding to, or would you be just adding to a building?
The existing buildings will remain. This would be new buildings.
New construction.
And
so, okay, so it seems to me that you could keep the same footprint. You'd be adding square footage on the upper level, so it wouldn't necessarily mean an increased footprint.
Well, that would mean a reduced amount of square footage on the ground floor because of the vertical transportation.
Correct, but you'd be gaining square footage on the 2nd floor, which I understand is not equivalent square footage, but okay, that's fine. That answers my question. And yes, I think that those are all my questions. Thank you. I have staff questions later, but Mayor, are we holding those?
Please go ahead and ask staff questions now too.
Oh, okay. Does our stormwater staff have any additional recommendations or comments, given the fact that this construction is happening in a floodplain?
I believe Ernest is here. Yes, there he is.
Yeah, good evening. So we did put conditions in the recommended SCP stipulation that's going to be developed. And they're going to meet the requirement of the town's flood damage prevention ordinance. And the developer also is recommending to do some stormwater improvements on the site. And I would say that I've not seen any stormwater reports or any detailed hydraulic models for the floodplain impacts. However, we're going to make sure that during the zoning compliance stage, that the final plan review stage, we're going to make sure they adhere to the conditions that we're going to put in the stipulation.
Okay, and are there any additional stipulations you feel are required for this particular piece of property, or are you satisfied with the ones you have?
I'm satisfied in terms of the stormwater treatment, they are reducing impervious area on the site, and they are proposing to do water quality treatment. And we've put conditions to make sure that there will not be any adverse impact in terms of flood damage to neighboring properties, making sure that if they don't cause any rise in water surface elevation due to this development. We also make sure that water is not going to spread horizontally to impact neighboring properties. So we're going to make sure that there's no storage lost due to this development.
Thank you very much. My second question is, who has evaluated all the details in the design line documents? I know that we had asked the CDC to do that and they have not yet done so. It concerns me that we've got really a regulating document for a very large development that I don't feel like has been gone through very thoroughly. So that remains a very large concern for me. I know that it was adopted from various town ordinances, but there have been changes. For instance, we've got, well, anyway, so that's a concern of mine moving forward. I don't really feel like I've heard from staff thoroughly that they have reviewed that and feel that the implications of all those design commitments that we would be making are in the town interest and what we have traditionally done. So that just remains a concern of mine. And if staff could answer a question, for instance, the Willow frontage is proposing a 5-foot sidewalk standard. Is that what we consider normal for a walkable pedestrian area? So for instance, would that be the nearby Blue Hill district? Would that be considered a standard sidewalk, or would it be wider than that?
So 5 feet is our standard. Blue Hill sidewalks do have a wider section, cross section.
And this is basically a more urban area like Blue Hill as opposed to my neighborhood street. So what would the Blue Hill standard be?
I don't believe I know off the top of my head, but I think it's like 8 feet.
Okay, all right, thank you. And if for some reason council denies the special use permit, would there be any delay for the applicant to say, resubmit and begin a development agreement process?
No, our ordinance is specific on a special use permit that it is a year for them to basically resubmit something to go through that process, but there's no chain to go to a different process.
Okay, and maybe this is a question, I don't know if it's for you or for Anne, but is it true that it's up to council to decide whether a requested modification meets the community's interests or not? So getting better does not necessarily mean that it is something that council needs to approve if they still feel it is not adequate. So we're making something 50% better, but we're not meeting town standards. The council is not obliged to consider that. But we could consider that modification is not adequate.
Yeah, what you're obliged to do in this process is to follow that specific standard that's set forth when in the LUMO with respect to SUPs and your ability to modify regulations in that context. And so it has to do with substantially. So I don't know the exact language, and I'm sure Ms. Nice Brown has it in front of her, but it is that specific standard that applies here and no other. So it's not the same as your general legislative breadth of authority, but it's not specifically those 4 findings either. And it's based on the evidence in front of you in this record.
Correct. So it's so we need to determine whether that modification meets community interests, basically.
Yeah, meets the standard that I think Leanne is just about to quote to you right now.
Thank you.
So what your ordinance requires at section 4.5.6, what it states is that where actions, designs, or solutions proposed by the applicant are not literally in accord with applicable special use regulations, general regulations, or other regulations in this appendix, but the town council makes a finding in the particular case that public purposes are satisfied to an equivalent or greater degree, the town may make specific modifications of the regulations in the particular case. Any modification of regulations shall be explicitly indicated in the special use permit or modification of special use permit.
And that last language is already incorporated into the proposed ordinance that you have. So when you were talking about community interests, that last language that she was reading is what you are talking about. And that
Okay.
is your standard tonight.
Okay,
And-
so it's our job to use the evidence and to weigh it and then to figure out whether it's meeting the public purposes that the ordinance has set forth.
Yes, ma'am. And the way that differs in the SUP context is that the universe of evidence that you are allowed to consider is what is before you in this context. And that's the distinction that I would make. But yes, otherwise you are correct.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yes, ma'am.
Hey, Ms. Stegman, followed by Mr. Parker.
I have several questions about the farmers markets. I'm trying to understand more details of what the plan is and what the agreement is with the farmers market. And they sent an email to us to council this week. Did you all get that as well? With some requests or feedback? It wasn't clear to me.
I don't think we got it because I'm not sure what you're referring to. They did send an email to me with their feedback from the plan that we presented last time. So that may be similar.
It's probably the same thing. It's about backing the spaces and
Yep.
some of the trees and flexibility and ability to expand. So you have that feedback. Okay.
Yes.
So I wanted to make sure about that, but my question is around, so some of the materials refer to it as a permanent home for the farmers market. And how are we defining permanent? What are the terms of the lease and are they paying rent, and how, can you say more about that?
Not a whole lot, because we really haven't gotten that far. I mean, we've been talking about the space more than we've been talking about the lease itself. I mean, we have a pretty flexible agreement right now, but in their last email with the feedback that sounds like you all got as well, they did make the comment that they would be interested in signing a longer term lease. And I think, we'd certainly want that as well if we're making a 6-figure commitment to a space for them. There will be rent. It's not going to be significant. It'll be probably a nominal increase from what they pay now. And that's really to support the additional operating and maintenance expenses for the space.
Okay. And so what, I guess, what happens? I'm trying to think about sort of what legal structures are in place to kind of protect the farmers market. Like, let's say, 5 years, whatever the right term is, you sell the whole development, and it's not clear to me that commitment to the farmers market would convey, or that the new owner could, jack up the rent, or, if they wanted to use the space differently. So I'm just trying to understand what is in place, what could be done, whether, for instance, I don't know if this would be helpful to you or not, if it makes sense for the town to manage that space, instead of having to deal with that. The space is talked about as the farmers market and other events or other activities. So I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, so I mean, like I said, we're open to a long-term lease, and so assuming we get there, and I'm not sure what they consider that, but I would consider that probably a 10-year initial term with probably 10 more years of option terms. And so assuming we get that signed up, then regardless of whether we sell someone, they would have no legal rights to remove them for the 20 years of term or whatever the final number ends up being.
Okay, that sounds, that's helpful. Thanks.
Okay. Mr. Parker, followed by Ms. Anderson.
Yeah, a couple of questions. One was following up on Ms. Ryan's point about the design guidelines. This may have been answered, but if so, I apologize for forgetting the answer. But are the design guidelines, or are they binding if and when the SUP were to be approved with the stipulations that include the design guidelines? Do those have the force of regulation, or are they just guidelines that we would hope that the builders or developers would follow?
So our special use permit before you, there is a stipulation in there about the design guide standards that saying we will work with the CDC and work with the town urban designer as well as other town staff to review and evaluate the design standards subject to town manager approval. And then the approved documents would be recorded and cross-referenced with the special use permit. So there is intent that these will be recorded documents that so in the future, they would be able to be referenced and that sort of thing. And we would be reviewing projects, pieces that come in on this property in accordance with those documents.
Okay, the second question is just want to double check. I think it's great that the multi-use path will, go all the way to Willow and, go in front of the church. Does that require acquisition of any land? Has the church been consulted on that? Are they good, bad, or indifferent with it? Would it require taking any of the church's land, or will that be is that land already in the public right of way? Not all at once.
I believe the applicant should respond.
Yeah, so the land is in the public right of way. I did have a call on Sunday afternoon with the folks at Binkley, and I think some of them may be on this call here tonight. So they'll probably be able to give you their thoughts on it. But I think there were some concerns with the path just from the perspective of adding impervious surface there. I think they saw the benefit in the connectivity and just the lack of connectivity that's there today. But I think the one comment they made was about the additional impervious surface.
Okay, and then the last thing for now, getting to Ms. Stegman's point about the farmer's market. So, what you've said, I think is great, is certainly very reasonable and, but again, is it possible to put any of that in the stipulations of the approval so that there is some obligation to conclude an agreement with the farmer's market or, guarantee a lease term from them? Because I know you've said that it's to your advantage to have them there, and I firmly believe that. But I also like things to be in writing. So is there any way, apart from the fact that at some point you may or may not sign a lease with them, you'd be willing to agree to something? And I'm not an attorney, so I don't know how to do this. Some language in the, the stipulations that would ensure that the farmer's market has a home at a reasonable price.
I mean, I don't feel comfortable with that because I can't control what they do or say. So I don't know how we put that in a stipulation, when there's a third party that we don't control. I mean, I would be fine saying we'll make best efforts, but I don't know how, what that really does.
I would be just from a practical legal point of view, I would be concerned about including a stipulation or condition in a modified special use permit that tied our ability to comply to the permit to someone who's not a party to the permit or an owner of the land with which it runs to agree with us. In other words, we can't make the farmer's market enter into a lease with us. We hope they will. what we have done instead is to design the project in a way that encourages their presence, which makes a home for them if they want to come. And we've been in negotiations with them and believe that they will. We're interested in having a longer term lease with them so that they have the security and the community has the security that they are there. And if they choose to sign that, we will be there. But I would not want to condition the permit on obtaining an agreement from a third party to take a certain act, and don't think you can really do that successfully in an SUP. So you do have our word that we're working with them, and you do have a significant financial contribution to creating a space. So I think it's a Field of Dreams moment. We're going to build it, and we believe they're going to come.
Okay, well, okay. Where do you plant the corn?
In the farmer's market.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Anderson, then Mr. Boynton.
Thank you. A couple follow-ups. In terms of this conversation about the farmer's market, I guess I'm a little confused about, is it not possible to put language that would say if they wanted to, the applicant would provide the space at a, certain rent for a certain number of years. So of course we can't force the farmer's market to be there or to stay there, but is there not a way to put language that would compel the applicant to provide certain things?
I think Ms. Anderson is still on the call as well. I don't know that you can put in a specific rent control measure in a permit, which is I think what this would do.
I will weigh in if council would like me to.
Yes, please.
Yeah, the tricky bit here is that you're talking about something that veers away from land use and more into a private contract between entities. And also the business of requiring a particular contract with a particular entity. And so I think those are the issues. And the question, the way you framed it, Councilmember Anderson, does raise issues of requiring a rent control measure, which is as you all we've talked about in the recent past, is prohibited by North Carolina statute, not our own ordinances.
So Ms. Anderson, is there language that you would recommend that would be better than mine that could get at the interest?
I'd be happy to work with the applicant and their counsel to come up with something that might be workable, that doesn't veer away from the land use purposes. It's difficult to come up with it in this format. I've got thoughts in my head, but in a public setting, it's tricky. But
yeah, understood.
Happy to work on that to the extent that's something that the applicant has an appetite for.
We are certainly committed to using our best efforts to, and again, the commitment to build the space is indicative of the fact that we're going to use our best efforts to make this happen. And I'm certainly willing to work with Ms. Anderson to have language that reflects our intent to do that. So long as we avoid the kinds of legal problems we're discussing with exclusive emoluments and rent control, I think we're happy to tell you in this meeting that we will use our best efforts, and we're happy to use those best efforts. And we certainly are not interested in creating a space and then not having something to go there that we've anticipated. So there's great truth to that.
Understood. I appreciate your willingness to work with the attorney, with our attorney, and get me out of the wordsmithing business, which nobody wants. So thank you for that.
I'll go off screen and start working on it this moment.
All right, you can text me.
Thank you. My next question, Ernest, could you talk about the stormwater mitigation? And I am getting a little lost on the stormwater, but so now we are meeting our town standards. Does that mean mitigating a 25-year storm?
Yeah, so they will still have to analyze peak flow rate. Peak flow rate is like the stormwater that is leaving the site. The 1, 2, and 25-year storm event. They will have to analyze for all the discharge points on the site. What I would say is I've not seen those analyses, but we will stipulate in the condition that is going to be approved that they will have to meet that, so that we will review it in the zoning compliance stage. So we will make sure they meet those requirements.
And your professional judgment is that that is satisfactory, that it doesn't need to be a higher standard in this case, based on the fact that there are a lot of flooding issues over in the direct vicinity.
I would say that they are meeting the requirement of the land use management ordinance. Anything higher than that is also acceptable, but what I would say, they are meeting the requirement of the land use management ordinance. And we're gonna make sure that they are going to analyze the flood. I mean, it's two different things. We have the peak flow rate, and then we have the flood damage prevention ordinance, where we look at impacts in terms of flooding, making sure that they take the state's model, the floodplain model, and then they input their proposed development in the model, and then we analyze the spreading of the water in the area. So they will still analyze the impact of the 100-year flood, base flood elevation, making sure that they don't impact neighboring properties. So even though they are doing the peak flow rate for the 1, 2, and 25 years, they will still analyze the 100-year flood study. They will the flood study report to analyze the 100-year storm event. Am I clear? Or
I think so. But so then my follow-up question is, so I think what you're saying is that if the analysis comes back and says, actually, based on impact to neighbors, you need to meet the 100-year storm event, then that will be what has to happen based on the stipulations. Is that fair?
Yeah, that is fair. We are going to say that they don't impact any neighboring property. In terms of, there will be no adverse impact on neighboring property, and that's why in one of the conditions that we are putting in the stipulation is that there will not be any flood storage loss. So what we are saying is when there's flood storage loss, that is where there's a possibility that the water is going to move onto neighboring properties.
Mm-hmm.
So the way they are allocating the structures on the property, they are making sure that with the demolition and what they are also doing, at least they are not going to take any storage in the floodplain. So by making sure that they adhere to those requirements, definitely I feel comfortable that they're going to meet the flood damage prevention ordinance.
Okay. So there's nothing else that you feel that we need to strengthen the protection for Camelot Village or the apartments, on Willow Drive or whatever, that there's nothing else that you can think of that we should or could do to make, to ensure the safety of the area?
So that will all depend on the model that they have to. So the model that is going to come to me, they're going to meet the requirement of the 100-year flood damage prevention ordinance. If what I say shows something different, then I'll make sure the developer, before we approve it, we're going to make sure they meet those requirements. What I want to commit to here is that I'm gonna make sure that there's not gonna be any impact on, it's not going to be worse than what it is now. I'm not saying there's not gonna be flooding on Camelot, but what I'm saying is this project shouldn't have any adverse impact on the surround.
Yeah, I understand. I mean, Camelot is flooding on its own. I understand that. It's not, I understand. Okay. And are there things that the applicant could do if they were willing that would make life better for Camelot Village, for example?
Yeah, I mean, one of the conditions that I recommended in the stipulation was at least look at areas where they could elevate the structures and so that they do parking under it, so that you are not taking storage out of the floodplain, thereby you are not pushing water onto Camelot. So, those are the stuff that we will be looking at and making sure that at least they are not, instead of using foundation to elevate structures, they'll use piers to elevate structures so that you have that space for the water to still be able to spread as it's doing now. And those are the things that we've recommended in the stipulation to make sure that there's no adverse impact on Camelot.
And are you saying those are currently in? Those stipulations are currently accepted by the applicant and are in right now?
What I drafted for the planning development folks, it is in. What I don't know is whether it's been conveyed to the developer. I've already have it, sent it to the planning department, and I'm not certain it's been conveyed to them yet.
Could the applicant respond?
So in your revised resolution A, there are currently, I believe, 133 conditions on this project, and that includes the conditions regarding stormwater. And the applicant has agreed to the conditions that are included in resolution A.
So Ernest, just to make sure that I'm clear, you're saying that not only will the neighboring properties not be adversely impacted any more than they currently are, but there are things in there that will actually make it better than it is now?
Yes. One, we also have to know that they are reducing pervious area. So the moment you are reducing pervious area on the site, one, the peak rate that is for the water leaving the site is going to reduce. So for a low storm event, you're not going to have that kind of flashy water moving. You're going to have a little bit of infiltration. And they are having, they're also having some proposing green infrastructure where it's going to at least try to suck the water a little bit based on the storm event. So for low storm event, you'll see improvement. For the big hurricane kind of storm event, definitely you'll see those flooding. But what I'm saying is that with this project, it shouldn't be worse than what they are experiencing.
Yeah, I understand that. I understand that. And then it sounds like for small events, it might be a bit better.
Yeah.
Okay. And there's nothing that can be done to make the bigger events better.
It is floodplain, and floodplain normally will flood. And so unless you want to, it's not an easy question to answer, is because floodplain floods, and we try to mitigate it by doing flood insurance policies. That's why we have flood insurance and all those stuff in place to mitigate those impacts, because we know when you're in the floodplain, you're gonna flood, but we try to mitigate those impacts.
Okay, that's fair. Thank you for putting up with those questions. And I get my final question is about the conversion to residential. I guess I'm a little bit confused about why the number went from one is it 1 per 1,000 down to 1 to 800?
Yeah, so I can address that. The thought behind that was really two things. One, the market average unit size for multifamily is about 800 square feet. And then two, the feedback we got was we want more commercial. So by reducing the conversion rate, it preserves more commercial.
Okay. And the question for our staff is, has the conversion scenario been analyzed, and does the staff have any thoughts or recommendations on things that could be more beneficial or other options that we should look at?
I don't believe that we in planning have had an opportunity to really dive into it in that depth that you're suggesting, Councilmember.
That's fair. That's that's an answer. Okay. And is there the possibility to get some analysis on a couple of these things should we continue the public hearing?
We can attempt to gather a team of staff folks to take a look at it.
And I don't know, has Dwight Bassett looked at it, or is he on the call?
I know he would be on my team.
Okay, but he has not, I guess he's not on the call and he has not looked so far.
No, I do not believe so.
Okay. All right, that's all my questions. Thank you.
Mr. Boyancy, did you have your hand up earlier?
Yes, just one question. So early in the presentation, someone referenced conversations with Binkley Baptist. I guess I'm wondering, to the third finding, if the applicant could describe the extent of any agreements or conversations with Binkley Baptist that would affect their property or the property's value.
Yeah, so again, I think some of those folks are on. So I don't know if it makes more sense to let them comment when the public portion opens, but I can say there are some concerns. There's the stipulation regarding traffic improvements, and one being the widening of Willow to accommodate a second left turn lane onto northbound Fordham. And so there's not sufficient right of way there today, so that would potentially impact them and their property. They have a nice natural tree buffer there, so I think there are some concerns that that buffer gets reduced. There's impact to trees, and so it's potentially a negative impact to them from that regard. And I think that's one of their concerns. But again, I think it might be best to let them convey them.
Got it. Thanks.
Other council members, Ms. Gu?
I don't know, today, is there a presentation by the developer? Are you going to present the information that you send to the council, or just assume that already received, we just ask the questions directly? We just ask questions. You do not. Oh, okay, then I will just ask question then. In your in the material that you presented, shared with the council, you mentioned like multiple improvement with regard to stormwater management and the building facade and the frontage and all these things. So for the stormwater, you mentioned that there is going to be like 30,000 square foot reduction in the impervious surface. There are 37,000 cubic feet increase in flood storage capacity. And you also mentioned that there is a 8% reduction in the peak flow rate for the 10, 20, 50, 100 year storm period, and a 2% reduction in peak volume for the 10-year return, and 3% reduction in 25, 50, and 100 year reduction storm events. Well, of course, those numbers all sound very impressive. I don't know if you have any material that to show us how you actually implement that. Do you have? You also mentioned that you committed, you're going to plant 250 new trees in the property. Do you have any plan, like detail to show that you actually how you're going to accomplish those things?
We don't, because we have a block plan. We don't, this isn't a detailed site plan that'll come at the ZCP phase. We have the 20% canopy requirement, so we have to plant 250 plus trees to hit that. And then on the stormwater, Hunter, I'll let you speak to that if you don't mind.
Yeah, my pleasure. I mean, again, as Ashley mentioned, the details of this and the reasons why the information provided is prefaced by approximations of numbers, is that the details will be included in the ZCP plans when we have full site plans and we can get a specific model. And also to Ernest's comment before, that's when the detailed models would be submitted again for his review and oversight and ensuring that we are complying. So we haven't done those detailed models yet because they would be filled with assumptions and there would be too many question marks or qualifications that would need to be put on there. But all that being said, the main driver for these stormwater improvements is the reduction of impervious cover, which is anticipated and is part of the conditions, and I believe is part of this documents. The secondary mechanism here is the fact that we are proposing to construct a new rain garden or bioretention area that will treat the additional 30,000 square feet of impervious compared to what is currently treated on the site. So that's not an increase in impervious area. It's an increase in the amount of impervious area that's treated by bioretention compared to today's conditions. So those are the two main factors, and those are part of the zoning documents that have been submitted.
So those commitments that you mentioned in that document about the 8% reduction in the peak flow and the 2% or 3% reduction in the peak volume, how these are calculated? How are you going to implement that? I just want these numbers. You just think it sounds impressive to cite. We implement that.
Right. So they are estimated numbers. I want to be clear that the 8% reduction in peak flow rates and the 2% reduction in volumes are estimates, not commitments of a threshold. They may be exceeded based on the final site plans. I can't be more exact in those numbers today.
But you cannot fall short of that. You say 8%, it cannot be like only 1% in the end.
Well, I think it's fair to say we've committed to the reduction in impervious cover and to that level. So that is the driver that's in the preliminary calculations. But again, the exact square footage of impervious reduction will be known at the ZCP phase, and we can submit the detailed reports at that point. But the way that those numbers are computed are based on land use. So they're based on impervious cover, lawn, and woods.
So it's not like you're actually going to install equipment or devices to monitor the peak flow or peak volume to make sure those numbers are you can hit those numbers. You're not going to do that.
We're not going to. No, there's no plan at this point to put monitoring equipment in. It's based on standard engineering calculations for those numbers.
Yeah. Okay. I got you. And then about this, the improvement for the frontage along the Willow Drive. You talk about the building, how the building that you're going to create public spaces and public amenities. And then in particular, you mentioned that you're going to add one or two or three, I don't know, there are different places that have different left with different impressions that you're going to add resident access on the Willow Drive. Can you just explain what kind of improvement you're going to do, or you're going to apply to the Willow Drive, that frontage? What are the improvements that you are proposing now?
Yeah, Jeff, do you want to take that?
Yeah, so several improvements are being made with a series of public spaces that we would link these gardens from one of the vehicular entrances to the other. These are the series of seating areas, small public spaces, the gardens. Regarding the entrances into and out of the building, there will be one primary entrance into the building that will serve residents. However, there are other access points that will be accessed. There will be paths to those doors. Residents will have key fobs and the ability to get in, enter out of the building, and enter into the building from these other access points. I think in total, between the sides of the buildings, the Willow Drive frontage and the rear, there's approximately 7 entrance and exit points for the building. that
Well,
would be
how many
accessible.
of them, how many access points there are along the Willow Drive?
Along Willow Drive, there are 3.
Oh, okay.
And there is an exhibit included in the materials that we provided to you, which I think shows the answer to your question as well. We tried to, based on the fact it was asked before, we provided that in that package of materials.
Yeah, well, there are drawings. I'm not exactly sure that they're entrance and exit. Okay, so and also no, I'm just looking at that drawing exhibit B2. That the buildings, it's kind of interesting that it's not a one flat long building. They're actually like different constructions, they're different areas. So what is the longest frontage, that continuous? Do you have a number for that? The continue, of course, there are breaks for various things like swimming pool. There is this, I don't know, the green space. I don't know what the person green amenities. I don't know, is it a garden or I don't know what it is, just drawing. So what, but there are like 3, it's break into like 3 sections. Do you have a number of what the lengths of those sections are?
Yeah, the longest length we have is about 168 feet.
So from, let's say, this end, I don't know, this is.
And that would be on the end closest to Estes.
Oh, closest to Estes. Okay, so on the end to the Estes, to this green space, the length of that block of building is 100, what, 68?
168.
Okay. So that is the longest, the continuous like frontage that you have now for this building.
Correct.
Okay, thanks.
Mr. Nguyen, did you have any questions? Okay, well, I will ask a couple. I know Mr. Peterson's on the line. I know he worked with the applicant on the building design. I want to know if he has other input that was not incorporated that he thinks would be important for considering on the design, because again, still concerned with the total length and massing of this building.
Well, good evening, everyone. I believe that you were sent my most recent comments about this project in the response to council questions. And so I think those are accurate in my opinion of the project. I do think that the massing of the building, as Councilmember Gu was asking about, the fact that it has a number of notches out along Willow Drive makes a big difference. And so it's not a very long stretch with of just continuous building facade. I did make one suggestion to the group that they consider flipping the U-shaped portion of the building that currently has a courtyard that faces on the mall, to have it to flip that the courtyard faces Willow Drive, which I think would make an even better frontage in terms of massing, because that building would essentially look like an individual building as you are going down Willow, if they're willing to consider that. So so that's all I would add at this point. Is anything else, Mayor, that you?
No, that was what I was looking for you to help us with. Thank you.
Sure.
Mr. Salpal, are you willing to consider the flip that Mr. Peterson's talking about?
Yeah, so it creates an issue for a few reasons. One, just because of the vertical circulation and the fact that we have the retail parking on the ground level, which then it causes some conflicts with. And then 2, the reason we intentionally put it that way was because otherwise, by flipping it, you have units that then overlook the roof of the mall. And this way you don't. And so the fact that it's only 168 feet in length, we felt that it was appropriate to keep it that way.
Okay, I can see both arguments, so thank you. That's helpful. All right. I know we have members of the public wishing to speak, and we welcome your input. I know we have several members from Binkley Baptist Church here as well. Mr. Parker will call you in 2 at a time, and we ask you to stay within a 3-minute window if possible. And we do want to hear from you, so he will bring you in. Thank you.
The only person that signed up in advance was Marcus McFall. So we will bring Mr. McFall in. I do not see any raised hands among attendees or anyone else. So if there is anyone wishing to speak who is on this and has not signed up, please use the raise your hand function. Thank you.
Welcome, Reverend McFall.
Thank you. I appreciate this opportunity to address a matter that we believe could have some significant impact for Binkley Church. And my name is Marcus McFall, and I'm the senior pastor at Binkley. The proposed changes around University Place will bring much needed business, shopping, and dining into our area. And we are pleased that the mall will not sit empty. We hope it will thrive into a prosperous future. But we do bring some concerns, however, around some issues. First, the lack of notification to us from city staff as plans have proceeded to this point. And 2, the change in traffic lanes that we believe may dramatically affect entrance and exit of our property at Willow and Fordham. Binkley has been in our location since 1962, several years before the construction of University Mall. So it was disappointing that city planning has apparently so completely overlooked the impact of these changes on our congregation. It would seem only proper and right for the planning staff and or members of the town council to have reached out to Binkley well before now. So we ask for that time and consideration before any decision is made, particularly on road changes. Specifically, our concerns include these points. It is our understanding that the current intersection of Willow and the road leading between Binkley and Harris Teeter, nearest our Binkley preschool, in and out of the mall will be reconfigured and widened and will only allow right in, right out traffic. The proposed changes will make access to Binkley more problematic for church members and members of the community who use our building. Deliveries and waste disposal will also be complicated under the proposed changes. At the very least, there is considerable confusion as to whether there will or will not be significant change to the 2 routes that are essential in getting into our property. Second, there are plans that appear to require the loss of property at Binkley, including the widening of Willow Drive and the extension of a 10-foot wide concrete walking, biking pathway along both Fordham and Willow Drive, likely, as was noted earlier, resulting in the significant loss of trees. Third, our long history of concerns for equity and social justice in Chapel Hill and beyond leave us concerned about decisions around affordable housing. It is beneficial to all of us to assure a diversity of income and ethnicity populate our town. 4, we are also concerned about the impact of the Bowling Creek watershed as changes are made on the mall property. We hope that the development will include more permeable surfaces and other stormwater mitigation strategies, as discussed tonight, to decrease the flooding of the mall area, which it is prone to. 5th, most particularly, we are concerned that we learned of many of these proposals and changes 3 days before this meeting tonight. This redevelopment effort will have a significant impact on our church and our community. We need assurance that we will have access to our property for the duration of the project and that we have appropriate opportunities for input into these portions of the project that directly affect our operations. We would ask that you consider beginning a conversation to seriously think about and make plans for a community park and playground of some kind where the former home of K&W Cafeteria is located. A joint effort on the part of University Place developers, the Kids Zoo Children's Museum Board, who seem enthusiastic about this idea, and Binkley would add a significant place for playful enjoyment for children and families. And we would welcome the opportunity to collaborate on such a feature of University Place. We hope that, as has been true for over 4 decades, we can continue to have good communication and a respectful, effective relationship with our mall neighbors. Longtime members of our congregation recall that when University Mall was built, our founding pastor, Bob Seymour, referred to Binkley as the church in the marketplace, a space for renewal amidst commerce. And he and the members considered all of our facilities a community center.
Thank you.
Let me just finish. We look forward to new opportunities to serve in this expanded marketplace. And all we ask is the opportunity to meet with the town planning staff to discuss how we make that happen. Thank you.
Thank you. We also need to swear you in. I'm sorry, Miss Oliver will need to swear you in so we can put your testimony on.
So help me God.
She needs to ask you the question.
Pastor McFall, do you swear or affirm that the information you just presented was the truth to the best of your knowledge?
I can. Yes, I do.
Thank you.
Ms. Johnson, do you have a response for working with the Binkley property owners?
Certainly be happy to reach out to them, and I can, I'll reach out to Pastor McFall tomorrow.
Okay, thank you. All right, anyone else from the public wishing to speak on this matter?
Not that I can tell.
Okay, well, I will bring it back to council for either more comments or questions. I do want you, when you make your comments or questions, to tell me whether you are interested in the 15% at 80, 15% affordable housing at 80, I'm gonna get these numbers, AMI, or 10% at 65 AMI, or do you wish to see if there's a mix of the two that they're willing to offer? So when you speak, can you just answer that? So I had Mr. Parker, followed by Ms. Ryan, followed by, oh, everybody. Okay, we'll get everybody.
So a couple of things. One, I just wanted to state my personal opinion that I don't think this is quite ready to be voted on tonight. So I hope we will continue the hearing open, number one. Number two, I think that I really appreciate Mr. Peterson's review on this. And I understand the concerns, that Mr. Salpaugh registered, and I understand, completely. I also, however, think that, building, flipping the U, as it were, I think will really make it a much more interesting building and offers the potential for having, that become a real main entrance for the building. So I think it could be useful all the way around. And I certainly understand your concerns, but I would hope you would give it maybe another round of consideration before dismissing it, because I think it would really create a much better and potentially more vibrant frontage on Willow Drive. So, I appreciate the insights that Mr. Peterson brings to us, and I really hope that you'll consider following this one. The one related to that, I'm still kind of confused or bemused, I'm not sure which, by the notion that you're going to have, if I understood from the last meeting, at the can never tell when the road curves, it's what end of the building it is, the end of the building closer to Fordham, having a pool essentially at street level that seems to be open to the public as they walk by. It just sounds like problems waiting to happen. So if my understanding of your configuration is correct, I would certainly urge you to think about maybe doing something with the pool that's, safer for your residents, safer for the people who walk by, it just sounds like a place where little kids could get into trouble. And then, in light of Mr. Reverend McFall's comments, I was under the impression that you folks at RAM had actually had some conversations with Binkley, and that seems not to have happened. So I'm kind of trying to understand whether I misunderstood you or why I was under the impression that there had been an ongoing dialogue with Binkley, which clearly hasn't, at least according to Reverend McFall, hasn't happened. So those are my comments right now.
Any response from the applicant or?
Yeah, sorry, I wasn't sure if this was.
When you're invited to, yes.
So I guess on the Binkley topic, it had been several months since we had an in-depth conversation, and some of these items like the multi-use path have just come up in the last few weeks. But we got together on Sunday for probably a 2-hour conversation, and that's when we really got into the detail. So there, items like the road widening should have been brought to their attention previously, and I'll take the fault for that. But yeah, this was the first that we got into that level of detail with them. On the topic of the pool will actually be depressed somewhat from the curb. There'll be a landscape buffer in there, and there'll also be a security gate there that has fobbed access, so there's no interaction with the public.
And, I know what a temptation a pool might be. Would it be possible for people to throw things into the pool who might be walking by, who might just think it's a hoot to do so? Or, how secure will the pool be? Not just for people going through the gate, but actually, as I said, airmailing things.
I guess that's a possibility, but there's a lot of other crazy things that could happen too. I don't think that's a major concern for us.
Okay. And about the U-shape?
Mr. Barker, I was going to, you didn't make anything, sorry. About the U-shape, Mr. Salvo?
I can repeat what I said previously. We've evaluated it. I guess the one thing I didn't note is that section is where there's 4 very tall, mature oaks in front of it. So the impact of doing that will be minimized by that. And then there was a comment about making it a more interesting entrance, but the ground floor won't actually change by flipping that. So there won't be any impact to the street level or the pedestrian level.
Okay.
The affordable housing question, Mr. Parker?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I would. My apologies. I would go for the 10% to 65% of AMI.
Okay,
I think that seems to be the place where we have the most need in our community right now.
Okay. Mr. Boise, then Ms. Anderson. I'm getting everybody.
Okay. So I had a question about the notification. So are there notification requirements for an SCP modification? Could anyone speak to that?
Certainly there are. As part of a notice, we do a notification of property owners within 1,000 feet. But it does happen typically, your first public hearing was the beginning of May. It went to Planning Commission in the middle of April. So this notice would have gone out probably late March. So it's been quite a while since we've noticed.
Got it. And then I was wondering if anyone could speak to any potential impact on the entry and exit points to Binkley Baptist Church's property.
I know Kumar Nepali was on the call earlier. I have not looked to see if he's still here, but.
I'm here, Judy.
So would you be able to help with that question, Kumar, about Binkley Baptist's entrances?
I think we can meet with them and come up with a solution that meets both parties. I don't think we are increasing any number of lanes there. I'm sorry, I have to use the phone and now I am on video. I don't think we are going to, it's not feasible to add a lane there. That's what I understood based on the existing right of way on Willow Drive at the church. I think we will back off on that, but we can work with the church and also with the mall and see what can be done to move the traffic and meet with all the goals.
Okay, thank you. So I guess comment wise, I'll start off with the AMI. I also would prefer 10% AMI. It is a bit concerning to me about the level of communication with the only contiguous property there for Binkley Baptist Church. I mean, especially as it pertains to the third finding, that is a bit concerning, as well as some things that have been asserted in terms of the impact of the value or the impact on the property, including including the entry exit points. So I mean, I need a bit more clarity in that regard and what can be done to try to preserve things in that regard. So I mean, that's what I got. I guess, sorry, one more question. So with respect to the tree buffer, are the trees being described in the right of way for Fordham Boulevard, or is that something that is that only something that would be affected by the construction of a multi-use path, or are there other trees that would be impacted that don't that aren't a part of the multi-use path?
So I think the impact is more from the widening of Willow Drive, the multi-use path along Fordham. Right now there's actually sort of a dirt trail from, I think, people walking and riding their bikes along the grass there. There are a few trees right at the property line, and so I don't know exactly if it's 1 or 2 or 3, but that's really the only point where there's trees that are impacted from that. Again, I think the bigger impact would be to their tree buffer on the Willow side from needing the right of way. But just to clarify or reiterate, maybe the stipulation is that we're to make that improvement if we're able to acquire the right of way. The right of way is controlled by Binkley Baptist, so if they choose not to provide the right of way, then that stipulation can't be met. And so it is in their control.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Ms. Anderson, then Ms. Ryan, and Mr. Nguyen.
Thanks. Well, I'll just start off saying I really do look forward to this property being redeveloped. I agree that it's really important that this mall be revitalized, and I'm excited to see that happen. I would like to see the design guidelines reviewed so we can understand how they compare to Blue Hill or where particularly they're coming from and what the differences might be. I think that would be really helpful. I like Mr. Peterson's idea of flipping the U shape. I'm hearing that doesn't sound too appealing to the developer, but maybe if that could be relooked at, I think that would be helpful. I appreciate the attorneys working on the additional language around the farmer's market, and I would also request that we get some staff review on the conversion and get some advice there. In terms of the affordable housing, I would be interested at 10% at 65% AMI or a mix. I don't know exactly what the mix would be, but weighted more towards the 65% AMI, but maybe it doesn't have to be 100% 65. I won't make that too complicated, but having some other units in there. So maybe a little bit more higher count with slightly higher cost could be okay too. I love the idea of the Kids Zoo, Binkley and U Place working together. And I know you're going to be shocked, colleagues, but I really think that there should be a splash pad there. So I think if you could do a really cool space that could work well with Kids Zoo, I know Kids Zoo has wanted some outdoor space, and having some sort of splash pad out there along with park space, I think would be an amazing use. And I do agree that I think we're not ready tonight, that we need some more time. Thanks.
Okay, Ms. Ryan and Mr. Nguyen.
Hi, thank you. So I agree with Mr. Parker that I don't think we're ready to close the hearing at this point. And I agree with Ms. Anderson that we very much want a vibrant mall here. It's a really important part of our town. And I know that council wants to work to facilitate its redevelopment. So I'm glad that the applicant's proposing community benefits like the farmer's market and the path to Binkley, but I want to make sure that we're focusing on the larger central issues that we need to resolve the real bones of this project. I'm very troubled that the design guidelines haven't been reviewed by the CDC, and I think that probably staff has not had the chance to do a real deep dive into them. We didn't understand the implications of the Blue Hill project really until it started being built, and then we made some important changes. For instance, we increased step backs on large facades, so we didn't just have 5 stories straight up, and I don't believe that the Willow building has those. So there are things we've kind of learned by trial and error in town that we have now come to think are part of the good urban design of Chapel Hill. So, and I just in general, I'm troubled by the fact that that the applicant is asked to structure the project as a series of design guidelines and not actually site plans and designs. If we do adopt this at some point with design guidelines, I would say that they need to be binding and not just guidance. So another issue is the Willow building. I still feel it's too large. Maybe that flip will help, but I don't, it's a very large building. A 5-foot sidewalk is not generous for this kind of walkable urban space. So I think that we need to work a little bit more on that frontage and on that building permeability and reducing all that blocky massing. Because this project is in a floodplain, I know that makes everything very, very difficult. I really feel that we need to come up to current impervious surface standards. If we can't continue to allow extra impervious surface on some projects, and then we're spending millions on the other hand to mitigate stormwater issues with big stormwater ponds, you know, I think we need to really look at our environmental issues and address them holistically. I don't feel that the 20% tree canopy cover is in the town interests. Our climate action plan specifically mentions maintaining and improving the tree canopy. I would be willing to talk about not a modification, but I know that our tree canopy ordinance allows for a payment in lieu if the percentage numbers aren't being met. So I would, if the trees can't go on site, I'd be interested in looking at that. I think we do need more time to address Binkley's concern. And I would be for the affordable housing, I would think not the 15% at 80. I know we were talking at Aura about a mix or the 10% at 65. I think just ask staff if they can come back with a recommendation for that. And those are my comments. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Mr. Nguyen, then Ms. Stegman, then Ms. Gu.
Thank you. I also agree with the sentiments of my colleagues about us not being ready to vote on this. And on the affordable housing piece, I definitely would prefer the 10% at 65% AMI. And yeah, just echo a lot of the concerns and would also love to see that U-turned if possible, or at least strongly reconsider that. But yeah.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Stegman, then Ms. Gu.
I will focus on just a couple of things. In terms of the affordable housing, I am in favor of the 65%. That's kind of the minimum of affordability, I think, for rental. And I'd also request that you consider accepting housing vouchers as part of that agreement. That's a really tough one in town. I also want to make sure we figure out that farmers market language that I think our attorneys are already texting about. And also reiterate the need to work things out with Binkley. Councilmember Anderson will be shocked that I agree with her on the splash pad for this site. As long as it's not too close to the pool and have kids throwing things in it or out of it or something that will upset Councilmember Parker. I agree with just asking that you take another look at that Willow Drive layout for the building. And I like the idea of the potential for a payment in lieu on the trees to cover that gap. I think others have covered everything else. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Gu.
Yeah, well, I think that we all agree that we do want this project to as an infill project on the existing mall to bring the vibrancy that we have been looking for. And if we can do that, at the same time, we can improve the green spaces, impervious surfaces, and make that environmentally more sustainable and more inviting to the community. I think that's a great opportunity that we cannot miss. So that's I think I do want this project to happen, but given the sensitive nature of the site, I think there are issues that we need to take care of. Well, I think the new information, I mean, throughout those hearings, sometimes we do get new information. I think the fact that the Binkley Church actually haven't been involved during for this long conversation, it's new information to me. I'm kind of surprised that we are at this point that we are being notified that they actually have not been thoroughly updated and being part of this conversation. I think this is definitely something that we need to make up to. So I agree that today we're not ready to vote on this project. We need to get them involved and to make sure that we probably address their concerns. So and also for their idea of the proposal of the playground, some joint efforts by the University Place and the Binkley Church. I think that playground idea, I think is very exciting. I do not even need to mention the splash pad, but the whole idea of having the playground right at the location, I think it's an ideal location. I think it's a great idea. Really, I think, I always support the developers to engage the community, the neighbors as early as possible and just listen to them. I think lots of times that they actually can bring in very great ideas to it. So I strongly urge you to engage with the Binkley Church and trying to resolve their concerns. And if we can make that playground happen, that'd be awesome. And then, so I think because the stormwater is a big concern that we have, I think, so I realize that those numbers, that the 8% reduction in peak storm rate and the 3% reduction in the peak volume is just some estimate and a calculation. And I think that given how sensitive that site is, I'm hoping there's some stormwater monitoring device or measures that we are going to commit to. I think that's very important because we really do not know what the situation is going to be. We just have to admit that because of this climate change and all the climate events, all the weather events will come to us at a much greater intensity. And I think it is to the benefit both to the University Place, the developer, the tenants, of the new development, and of course of our residents in the Camelot Village as well. I think we do need a stormwater monitoring system somehow, some way of doing that. I'm not an engineer, but I think we need to have that to make sure that actually the measurements that or the improvement that we have in place can probably address the concerns that we have, given the unknowns that we know are there. I think it's important for us to do have some monitoring system in place so that if additional measures need to be taken, we can take actions at that moment. So I would strongly urge that we do have those stormwater monitoring systems so that your commitment of 8% reduction and 3% reduction will actually become reality. With regard to the Willow Drive frontage, I actually am very encouraged by the improvement. I think it's definitely another example of how that the development can be improved greatly by working with our urban planning staff. Well, at first, I think that's a big point that I feel that this is building's too long. It's not safe. I had significant concerns for that, but I think it has. The plan that has been presented, the revised plan, I think is a significant improvement. But I do agree. I can see Mr. Parker mentioned that I also feel strange that having a swimming pool right next to a busy street is a good idea. I don't know who designed it and what's the reason for that. I think if the turn the U-shaped courtyard is not something that you think you can do, maybe you can switch these two. The location of the swimming pool can be used as the courtyard and the courtyard location can be used as a swimming pool. But having a swimming pool right next to like a busy street with lots of cars, kind of strange to me, but I don't know how important that is. But that is something that I'm hoping that you can consider. With regard to the affordable housing, I think I agree with my other council colleagues. If we can go and accommodate the lower incomes at the 60% income level, that's the option I would prefer.
Okay, thank you. I won't repeat a lot of what's been said, but I'm in agreement. I do like the payment in lieu for trees, though. I wanted to add that, and I'm in the 65% AMI, so I think you're hearing from the majority of council, they would prefer that, so we have that answer there. I will say you've made progress. I don't think we're there yet either. I will tell you, though, we're coming up against the end of our meeting schedule, so I put out to council, there's two options, in my opinion, for continuing this. We could close the public hearing, but continue deliberations and voting for either next week, which wouldn't give people much time to get the answers in, or we could add it to the 21st agenda that we've added the new meeting to. I would recommend the 21st. I think it makes more sense, but you want to give a thumbs up for the 21st or?
Just one more comment. I guess the attorney would need to weigh in on this, but I know there are issues with closing the public hearing if we still have significant issues outstanding,
okay.
Which I think that we do at this point.
Okay. So we can continue the public hearing then and deliberate that same night on an SUP, Ms. Anderson?
You may do so and vote.
Okay.
I'm just going to remind you that I won't be here, but that's fine. But good luck.
Mr. Boyce?
And beat me to that punch. I was going to say I'm also not available on the 21st either. So.
Well, that raises significant concerns, I imagine, for the applicant, and I would want them to have a chance to weigh in on that.
Okay.
Yes, that raises significant concerns for us if two of you are not going to be there for a meeting on the 23rd or 21st, I'm sorry. That would be of issue to us. I think that we can pull together fairly quickly a response back to you on what I've heard to be the remaining issues that you've raised tonight on Binkley Baptist Church. Well, I think one of their concerns is no longer included in the stipulations at all. So I think we can get that addressed as well. But we need to move forward with getting to the end of the public hearing process and to a vote. So if we're not going to have two of you on the 21st, what is our other option?
Next week, June 16th.
So
Staff, how do you feel? The council has asked for the CDC to do a cursory review of the guidelines just to make sure we're not missing anything. Is there any way for our CDC to pull together and do that? Because that's
Yeah, and it's not a cursory review. I've done a cursory review of them, but it's not, it's really, if that's going to be, if what they're proposing is that instead of having a site plan and actual plans for the buildings, if they're proposing a regulatory document like the design guidelines, we really need to understand it. It's big and it's complicated, and just having it, it just hasn't gotten oversight in the way I think that it needs to. So, and I know poor Judy is, the idea of reviewing that whole thing, and by the time that she has to have a packet ready for that next meeting is what that would give you 48 hours.
Yeah.
If I could speak briefly to that concern, as we have worked with staff on this process and on the design guidelines, the condition that we have provides a significant period of time for us to work with the CDC on these guidelines. I believe it's 75 days without pulling back to it. And we did that in conjunction with staff as a means to get a deep dive into these documents while moving everything forward. So I think that while I hear and respect your concern very much, I do think that we have baked into the stipulations a deep review by the CDC that the staff had included as a way to deal with that concern.
Yeah, and I appreciate you recognizing the necessity of that review. It's just, I feel as somebody who's going to be responsible for the approval or denial of this project, that those are details that I can't leave to kind of to be determined somewhere down the road will happen. I think that's really part of my responsibility, my oversight responsibility as a council member, to have that kind of information before I make a decision.
So if it were to go to the CDC, and let's say the CDC made recommendations that the applicant didn't agree with, what's the dispute resolution mechanism built in? Because ultimately, does it come back to the council then? How do, I'm all in favor. I can maybe live with the CDC having this review, but does the CDC have final authority over it? As I said, I don't know that we can delegate. I'm not sure we can delegate that authority to the CDC or not.
Yes, Anderson.
If you'd like me to respond, I'd be happy to do that. Prior to council's approval or denial of the SUP application, you can't delegate any of your decision-making authority on the 4 findings to anybody, CDC included. And just to, as a quick reminder, the CDC does not have any role in SUPs under your ordinance. So although the CDC has reviewed this project, this particular application, I think that was by agreement of the applicant and not as a requirement of the ordinance. The only other body that has a role in SUPs is the Planning Commission. So that's an additional layer to consider.
Can you raise your hands, please, so I can see who wants to? Ms. Ryan.
And is that true, even though this was filed before the 160D changes?
Yes, ma'am. That with respect to SUPs, I believe it's long been the case that, and Judy will correct me if I'm wrong about this, but it's long been the case that the Planning Commission is the only advisory body that has an official role. But although it's long tradition that other bodies in Chapel Hill, it's long tradition that other bodies do hear and comment on it, nevertheless, which is what happened here. So it's normal.
Ms. Brown, did you have a response, please?
I'm trying to locate the condition in the conditions. I'm not suggesting that you delegate to the CDC the issues around the 4 findings. What I'm saying is that as we looked at how to finalize the design guidelines, that the condition that we worked on with staff and that is included in your packet has a review period subsequent to your approval to hash out any remaining details about what those guidelines look like.
Yeah, and just to clarify a few things on that, we've submitted the design guidelines, I think 3 separate times following comments back from planning staff. So we've worked on this in conjunction with them for the last year. And the stipulation as it's written now is that we would have 75 business days, so about 3.5 months from when we would resubmit the design standards following the SUP approval. And we would work in conjunction with CDC, planning staff, and ultimately the town manager would then approve the design standards.
It's condition 7 in proposed resolution A.
Okay. Ms. Anderson?
I agree with Amy. I think in the first time this came, I think I know that I've voiced concerns and others did as well about this being in the form of design guidelines and not a site plan. Since it feels, and I don't mean to imply that this was intentional, but it feels like we're drowned in paperwork and that we can't get through it or really understand what we're approving. So I don't feel comfortable either approving design guidelines and then delegating it to the CDC to review them. If it had come as a site plan, then we can let the CDC review after the fact. But if there is no site plan, I think it's really important that we understand and are careful and do our due diligence about what we're approving. And so if that means having the CDC review it, or staff, whatever the mechanism is and whatever the timeline needs to be, I think we've been expressing concerns about the design guidelines all along and not understanding what they really entail or what the implementation of them would mean.
Okay. So I'm hearing a couple things. You don't want to meet on the 21st on this issue because we will be missing 2 council members. We have council members that have concerns about our CDC reviewing the design guidelines and giving input, even though there's a stipulation for them to do so. Is it an option if we were vote to approve that we approve the stipulation that part happens over the summer and it comes back to us in September to acknowledge what they reviewed and the comments they made? Mr. Parker?
Yeah, I appreciate the notion of having the CDC review this. And I'm just looking at stipulation 7 now, and it's actually broader than that. It's the CDC and the urban designer, town staff. I am more actually interested in what our staff and what our town's urban designer has to say than I am in the CDC, which is not to dismiss the CDC. And so what this does do, as long as it's sufficiently clear, because it says final approval will be granted by the town manager. So as long as the town manager has the authority not to approve these after 75 days, if in his judgment, based on the advice he gets from the town staff and others to, not approve them, I'm okay with it. But I think that there needs to be some mechanism such that, after 75 daes, whatever the applicant has proposed automatically gets approved is certainly not something I'm comfortable with. So, but if the staff can say that within 75 or some number of days, they believe collectively they can provide the necessary review to make and work with the CDC to do that. And the problem there is, of course, this is over the summer potentially, and the CDC may not be available during the summer, but I'd be comfortable as long as the town manager has the authority to say, again, based on the advice of the CDC and the staff, that these are not satisfactory, and then kick them back to the council.
Thumbs up if that works for folks. I can't see. Okay, well, it looks like a majority of you are okay with that. Okay. Okay. Mr. Jones, did you have anything to share?
Yeah, I just wanted to point out that I do believe the CDC will be meeting over the summer. Is that correct, Judy?
Yeah. At least once.
At least once.
Yeah, they typically would take off July.
So they'll
They
be
would
meeting
be
in
back
August.
in August.
Okay. All right, are we in good shape then to meet on the 16th? And I guess, our packets normally go out on Friday, but I think you're going to probably need a little extra time. So we'll have to look for this item on Monday or so.
I just wanted to clarify with Judy and Ann on notification that we are if we continue the public hearing, does that give us, are we meeting our notification guidelines?
Yes, sir. This is a continuation of the evidentiary hearing. We're fine.
Just wanted to double check. Thanks.
Yes.
Is the applicant agreed to June 16th?
Yes.
Okay. I'll need a motion from council to get us there. Ms. Gu, did you have a comment?
Yeah, well, I'm not sure that, but it seems like that, like only 48 hours or something for I think the concerns that we brought forward seems like pretty substantive. I don't know how would the applicant would be able to provide the thorough investigation or negotiation or propose something that will to the council's satisfactory within such a short period of time. I don't know how would that happen. Like the stormwater question that I asked, I actually expect a substantive answer. So I'm not sure that is actually can realistically happen. I don't know how that, or I should say, I don't know how that could happen within that 48 hours.
I hear you, but we don't have many options right here, so I do hear you.
Well,
Ms. Ryan.
I understand everyone's frustration, and things are always hard at the end of the term. But I think this is a really big, important project, and the idea that we're moving very quickly just to kind of get it through the pipeline, I think is troubling to me. And a lot of these issues have been raised and have not really been addressed, and so I think. So I have.
Here's another proposal just for you to muddle over. We have a very full agenda on the 23rd, and we were actually considering noticing the 24th as a carryover date. Are you all available on the 24th if we need to add this item onto the 24th?
So we'd be meeting 3 days that week?
Yep.
I need a raise.
I know.
The Pride event and a home consortium meeting were both that night.
It's also the East Rosemary Street property swap closing and financing closings, and just throwing that one out there too.
Well, we're going to aim for the 16th, and we're going to have as much information as we can possibly have on the 16th to make a decision or to postpone a decision, whichever goes along with that. But we will get what we can get by the 16th and deliberate then. Okay, I need a motion to make that happen, please.
I move we continue the hearing till June 16th.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved by Mr. Parker, second by Ms. Stegman. Need a roll call vote, please. Mr. Parker?
Aye.
Ms. Anderson?
Aye.
Mr. Boynton?
Aye.
Ms. Gu?
Aye.
Mr. Nguyen?
Aye.
Ms. Ryan?
Aye.
Ms. Stegman?
Aye.
And the mayor says aye as well. So we will continue this on to June 16th. Thank you, everyone. And I know you'll work very hard to find the answers to the questions, and the sooner you can get it to us, the better. But we know we put you on the spot for this, so thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. All right.
Can I just make a suggestion to the staff and to the applicant?
Sure.
They don't need to get us all the answers in one batch. So as information becomes available, feed it to us rather than holding it all till very near the meeting.
That's a great recommendation. Thank you. All right. We made appointments to several boards this evening. We also will need a motion this evening on one of the recommendations. We appreciate all the applicants we've had for all these different positions. We still have a few positions open, so please continue to apply and don't give up if you have applied and weren't chosen. There do happen to be spots that come up during the year. So for the Downtown Partnership, we've appointed Mimi Hauk. To the Chapel Hill Library Board, we've reappointed Lucas Beal, Nicole Klett, and Blaine Schmidt. And then the council is recommending Allison Smith for the county seat, but I will need a motion for R10 to make this recommendation to Orange County Board of Commissioners.
So moved.
Second.
Been moved by Ms. Ryan, second by Ms. Anderson. I'll need a roll call vote, please. Mr. Parker.
Aye.
Ms. Anderson.
Aye.
Mr. Boincy.
Aye.
Ms. Gu.
Aye.
Mr. Nguyen.
Aye.
Ms. Ryan.
Aye.
Stegman.
Aye.
And the mayor says aye as well. Thank you. For the Arts Commission, the council has reappointed Annetta Streeter, Joshua Rosenstein, and Xylong Zhao. For Human Services, we've appointed Josh Ravenich and Kit Stanley. And I think that's the full list. So thank you for your ballots. And again, to all of you who applied, thank you very much. And thank you, council, for getting through this agenda. I know this is a big item tonight and we took it seriously. And we will see you next week on the 16th. Thank you. Meeting adjourned. I don't have a gavel at home, so just me.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.
Sleep tight. Don't let the bed bugs
Bye.
Brian?